Manhattan in the 1860s was America's most dangerous hellhole, where murder, robbery, and corruption ruled the streets and bribery bought the police. To expose this criminal underworld, a fearless investigative journalist disguised himself as a beggar and walked straight into the darkness. His name was Arthur Pember, and this is what life was really like in the deadly slums of New York. Before we start, likes and subscribes help me keep making these. Where are you listening from? Drop your city and time in the comments. I'm always reading them thinking, wait, people in New Zealand listen to history stories to sleep? Okay, tonight it's 1860s New York. But hold on, get cozy first. Like, actually cozy. Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. Your eyes open to darkness, not the comfortable darkness of your bedroom right now, but the suffocating black of a windowless room in Water Street, New York. The year is 1868, and you've just woken up on what can barely be called a bed, a dirty husk mattress thrown onto bare wooden boards that creak with every slight movement. The smell hits you immediately. Human waste, stale alcohol, and something else. Something rotten you can't quite place. The building around you is what locals call a tenant house, though human storage would be more accurate. You're sharing this one room with an entire family. Mom, dad, 3 kids, all piled on top of each other for warmth because there's no heat. The wall separating you from the next family might as well be paper. You can hear them fighting again. The man's drunk again. The woman's crying again. The baby hasn't stopped wailing for 2 hours. Unlike your comfortable bed right now, where you can stretch out and adjust your blanket just so, here your body aches from lying on what feels like a pile of sticks covered by a thin layer of fabric. Every movement brings a new pain, a spring, a broken board, a mysterious wet spot. "Get up!" hisses a voice beside you. "We need to be gone before the landlord comes." You're not actually living here. No, you're Arthur Pember, Oxford-educated Englishman turned investigative journalist, and you're in disguise. Today, you're a homeless beggar, your clothes deliberately tattered, face smudged with dirt, hair wild. Tomorrow, perhaps you'll be a drunken sailor or a lost businessman. Whatever gets you the story. I spent months researching Arthur Pember's accounts. This guy literally invented undercover journalism in America. Imagine giving up a cushy life to sleep in these hellholes just to expose corruption. Like, who does that? "Come on," your guide whispers again. He's a former pickpocket. You've paid to show you around. Water Street wakes up early, and trust me, you don't want to be noticed asking questions. You follow him down a narrow hallway where the floorboards bend beneath your weight. The stairs creak so loudly you're sure everyone in the building can hear you leaving. Outside, the morning air isn't the fresh relief you'd expect. It's thick with coal smoke and the stench from overflowing gutters. Welcome to the 4th Ward of New York City, the most dangerous neighborhood in America. Hold up. Let me paint you a picture. Water Street isn't just bad, it's nightmare territory. Picture the worst place you've been, then make it 10 times worse. The buildings are practically falling down, packed with up to 70 families in a single structure. Streets flowing with raw sewage. Disease is basically your roommate, and this is where Arthur Pember chose to go undercover. Pember wasn't always slumming it in New York's underbelly. The dude helped found the Football Association, like actual soccer, in England in 1863. He was its first president. Then he just decided to move to America and become an investigative journalist. Talk about a career change. You know what's wild? When I was digging through his original accounts, I found out he'd assumed these elaborate disguises. He'd go from looking like a proper Victorian gentleman to a street beggar, complete with fake wounds and practiced accents. The original method actor. As you walk, your guide points out landmarks of misery. See that place? Tommy Haddons. He's what they call a crimp, specializes in Shanghai, gets sailors drunk, drugs them, then sells them to ship captains needing crew. By the time the poor bastards wake up, they're halfway to China. You pass a woman slumped against a lamppost. Her bonnet's fallen down her back, her dress is splattered with mud, and she's singing a mangled version of an old French ballad to no one in particular. She captioned, "Wishy whiskers, core is shy, glancio, me poor captain." She slurs, one arm wrapped around the post for support, the other conducting an invisible orchestra. Your guide doesn't even slow down. "That's just Tuesday morning around here," he mutters. The gaslights cast eerie shadows as the morning fog hasn't fully lifted. Through it you see figures moving, some heading to work at the docks, others just ending their night of crime or vice. And speaking of crime, you're witnessing stuff that shouldn't exist in a supposedly civilized country. There are bucket shops where people can buy a tumbler of something pretending to be whiskey for 5 cents, liquid that's basically poison but gets you drunk fast. There are houses where men fight each other bloody while crowds bet on who'll die first. There are buildings where women are essentially enslaved. I mean, technically, prostitution is illegal, your guide explains with a shrug, but the cops get paid to look the other way. Everyone's on the take here. Suddenly, screams pierce the morning quiet. Your guide grabs your arm and pulls you into an alley. "Street fight," he whispers. "Don't get involved." But you're here to document exactly this, so you peer around the corner. The scene is pure chaos. Sailors, labourers, women, all tangled in a violent mass of kicking, punching and biting. Someone's wielding what looks like a cooking ladle as a weapon. Blood splashes on the cobblestones. Look, I've read police reports from this period and they're genuinely horrifying. This wasn't just shoving and name-calling. People died in these street fights, regularly, and no one really cared. 2 police officers are in the middle of it, using their clubs freely but making little difference. Then, in a move that turns your stomach, one woman gets a man's head in what your guide calls chancery, a position where she can smash his face repeatedly while another woman is pulling her hair out by the roots. You've seen bar fights back home in England. This isn't that. This is something feral, something desperate. Wait, what about the police? You ask your guide, watching the outnumbered officers getting attacked by the very people they were trying to control. Your guide laughs. "Welcome to Water Street. Even the cops don't come here unless they have to." As more police arrive and the fighters are rounded up, you and your guide continue on. The sun is finally breaking through, but it does little to make Water Street look better. In fact, the light only reveals more dirt, more decay, more desperation. "Where to first?" your guide asks. "Tommy Haddons," you reply. "I want to see this Shanghai operation for myself." Your guide looks at you like you've lost your mind. "Are you serious? That's basically asking to wake up on a ship to Australia." "I need to see it," you insist. "I'm careful." Your guide shrugs. "Your funeral." As you approach Haddon's establishment, you rehearse your cover story. You're a drifter looking for work, not too bright, perfect Shanghai material. The building itself looks almost respectable from the outside, a calculated facade. Inside, the air is thick with tobacco smoke and the sour smell of spilled beer. Despite the early hour, the place is busy. Sailors drinking away their pay, locals nursing cheap beers, and Haddon's runners eyeing newcomers like vultures watching dying animals. Tommy Haddon himself sits at a desk in the corner, a small, sharp-faced man with restless eyes. He's doing calculations in a ledger, probably figuring out how much a human being is worth on today's market. The Shanghai process is genius in its simplicity, a museum curator in maritime history told me when I was researching this, and utterly horrific in its execution. Here's how it worked. Haddon's runners would find men who were either drunk or could easily be convinced to drink. They'd lead them to Haddon's place for one more round. That drink would be drugged. When the victim passed out, they'd be taken upstairs and kept until a ship captain came looking for crew. The captain paid Haddon. The unconscious man was carried aboard, and by the time they woke up, they were at sea with no way back. You take a seat at the bar, trying to look both vulnerable and unremarkable. The bartender, a man with forearms like hams and scars across his knuckles, eyes you suspiciously. "What'll it be?" he asks. "Whiskey," you mutter, keeping your eyes down like someone with something to hide. The liquid, he pours, is amber, but you'd bet good money it's not actually whiskey. More likely watered-down rock gut with tobacco juice for colour and God knows what else for kick. You raise the glass to your lips but don't actually drink. You've heard stories about Haddon's special cocktails. A man slides onto the stool beside you, well-dressed, friendly smile, the kind of man your mother would have called too smooth by half. "New in town?" he asks casually, and this, right here, is how it begins. This friendly stranger is the first step toward waking up on a ship bound for China. "Just got in," you reply, slurring slightly to seem vulnerable. "Looking for work?" he asks, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Maybe. Got some prospects," you lie. "I might know something," he offers. "Good pay, see the world." You almost want to laugh at the transparency of it. "The world, huh?" you say, feigning interest. "Oh, yeah," the runner says, warming to his pitch. "Ever been to China, Australia, exotic places, beautiful women?" "Sounds expensive," you reply. "First round's on me," he says, signalling the bartender. "Let's talk about opportunities." And there it is. The trap is set. If you were actually a drifter, actually desperate, actually naive, you'd drink the doctored whiskey he's ordering. You'd pass out. You'd wake up at sea. You pretend to sip the new drink while the runner tells you increasingly elaborate lies about the wonderful life of a sailor. As you listen, you notice a man being carried down the stairs at the back of the room, limp, unconscious, clearly drugged. Two burly men take him out the back door, presumably to a waiting ship. The runner follows your gaze and quickly tries to distract you. "So, as I was saying about the pay, excuse me," you mutter, standing suddenly. "Need the privy." Instead of heading to the back where the toilets would be, you make for the front door. The runner calls after you, but you're already pushing your way outside, heart pounding. Your guide is waiting across the street. "That was quick," he says. "Did you see enough?" "Saw them carrying someone out," you reply, still shaken by the casual efficiency of it all. "Yeah, that happens all day, all night too. Haddon's got a deal with half the captains in the harbour." "Where to next?" you ask, straightening your disguise. Your guide grins, revealing a gold tooth among the brown ones. "How do you feel about entertainment? Ever seen a proper Water Street dance house?" As you follow him down the street, screams erupt from somewhere ahead. Not fight screams this time. Something worse. Your guide freezes. "What the hell was that?" you ask. "Nothing good," he replies, suddenly serious. "Nothing good at all." So here's the thing about Water Street. You couldn't really prepare for it. Even if someone told you how bad it was, seeing it was different, smelling it was different, hearing a man's screams cut short in the morning light was different. "We should go another way," your guide says quickly, pulling at your sleeve. "But you're here for the story, all of it, even the parts that make your skin crawl." "No," you say firmly, "we go toward it." Your guide looks at you like you're insane. They're going to find bits of you floating in the East River. You pull out extra money, real journalists' money, not beggar money. "Double if we check it out." He stares at the cash, then at your face. "Your funeral," he says, for the second time that morning. As you move cautiously toward the source of the screams, the busy street has gone strangely quiet. People are suddenly finding reasons to be elsewhere, heads down, walking fast. "Whatever happened," your guide whispers. "Nobody saw nothing. That's how it works here. You see something, you forget it immediately. You round the corner and immediately wish you hadn't. All right, that's a good chunk. Let me know when you're ready for the next part." The body is face down in the gutter, one arm twisted at an unnatural angle. Blood mixes with the filthy water, creating swirls of crimson that disappear down a nearby drain. People step around it, not over it, giving the corpse a wide berth as they continue their morning business. "Jesus," you whisper, "shouldn't someone do something?" Your guide looks at you like you've suggested flying to the moon. "Like what? Send for his family? Half the people here don't have families. The other half, their families don't want to know them. The police then?" He snorts. "They'll be by eventually. Body'll go to Potter's Field if nobody claims it. Circle of life in Water Street." The casual acceptance of death here makes your skin crawl. Back in London, a dead body in the street would cause hysteria, crowds, authorities. Here, it's just Tuesday. You pull out your notebook, a risky move in your beggar disguise, and quickly jot down notes. The dead man is youngish, maybe 30. No obvious signs of who he was or how he died, besides the pool of blood beneath him suggesting a knife wound. "Put that away," your guide hisses. "You trying to get us both killed?" You pocket the notebook just as a police officer saunters up to the body. He nudges it with his boot, sighs heavily, then signals to someone down the street. Two men with a cart appear, lift the corpse unceremoniously, and toss it in the back like a sack of potatoes. "That's it?" you ask, unable to hide your shock. "No investigation, no questions." "What's to investigate? Man's dead. Happens every day." The officer notices you watching and narrows his eyes. Your guide grabs your arm and pulls you away. "Don't make eye contact with the law," he mutters. "Not in that get-up. They'll run you in just for looking suspicious." As you turn the corner, your guide relaxes slightly. "So, dance house next?" Much more pleasant than corpses. The dance house doesn't look like much from the outside, just another dilapidated building on a street full of them. A crudely painted sign reads, "Sailors Retreat," though you suspect few sailors have found actual refuge within. Inside, the air is thick with tobacco smoke, cheap perfume, and the unmistakable smell of unwashed bodies. The place is divided into two sections, a bar area where men of questionable character lean against the counter, and through a partition, a dance floor where the real business happens. 10 cents gets you in, says a mountain of a man guarding the entrance to the dance floor. Your guide hands over the money and the bouncer steps aside, revealing what can only be described as a vision of hell disguised as entertainment. The dance floor itself is sticky with spilled drinks and God knows what else. Around the edges, benches line the walls where women in shockingly brief costumes sit with sailors and dock workers. The term costume is generous. They're essentially undergarments dyed bright colours, displaying more skin than you'd see at most beaches. Their dresses seem rather scant, you comment to the proprietor, a sleazy-looking man who's also the self-proclaimed band leader. "Oh, they've got enough for the purposes of decency," he replies with a wink. "You've been in some rough establishments in London, but nothing like this. The women range from young girls who can't be more than 15 to weathered veterans of 40 or 50. Some look bored, others desperate. A few seem completely intoxicated. All are wearing the same ridiculous outfit, a short dress barely covering essentials, glass beads around their necks and absurd feathered bonnets." I checked original accounts from reformers who visited these places, and they consistently mentioned how the women were dressed. It's like they were wearing parodies of fancy clothing, like someone saw a society lady once and tried to recreate it with scraps and stolen goods. The contrast between the elegant bonnets and the barely there dresses apparently made it even more depressing. The proprietor takes his seat in what he grandly calls the orchestra, a violin, banjo and tambourine, and shouts, "Now young ladies, a quadrille if you please," before launching into a tuneless melody. The women drag their partners to the floor, putting on exaggerated airs and graces that border on mockery of high society dances. The men stumble along, most too drunk to follow even the simplest steps. They say John Allen's place used to be the wildest, your guide tells you, nodding toward a building across the street. He reformed, though, or pretends he did. Missionaries paid him off. Missionaries? Oh yeah, religious folks come down here trying to save souls. Mostly they get robbed, but sometimes they make deals. Paid Allen a month's rent to use his dance hall for prayer meetings. A sailor nearby overhears and laughs. Allen took their money and only let them use it 2 weeks, clever bastard. You watch as a sailor who can barely stand attempts to waltz with 2 women at once, creating a bizarre 3-person tangle that ends with all of them crashing into a table. They prefer the shuffles, your guide explains. Sailors can't really do the fancy dances with their sea legs, too wobbly. One particularly drunk sailor slaps the shoulder of a scrawny woman with long, thin legs and calls her "old number 11, which sends the other dancers into fits of laughter. Your detective signals to one of the women who isn't currently entertaining a customer. She saunters over, and you're struck by the contrast between her crude outfit and her refined speech. "You're new," she says, looking you up and down. Despite your beggar disguise, she seems to sense you're different. "Just passing through," you reply. She laughs, a surprisingly musical sound in this den of misery. That's what they all say, yet here they all are, month after month. "How long have you been here?" you ask. 7 years, she replies, then leans closer as if sharing a secret. "I'm from a good family, you know. Very well educated. My mother's a widow lady with independent means in Scotland." You've heard similar stories in London's brothels, tales of genteel upbringings and tragic circumstances. Sometimes they're true. "Got into trouble when I was young," she continues. "Had to run away. Thank God my poor mother thinks I'm dead. It would kill her to see me here." She gestures around the room. You'd be shocked how many girls here are well-educated and from good families. Many can speak 2 or 3 languages, play the harp and piano, sing opera, but once you're in this life, you can't get out. Her eyes drift to a young girl, barely more than a child, being pawed at by a drunken dock worker. Many girls in these houses have parents living in style uptown. They'd never admit their daughters work here. Before you can ask more, the proprietor shouts for another dance, and she's pulled away by a customer. You make your way to the bar, where a bald man with massive forearms is pouring drinks. "What'll it be?" he asks. "Whatever's least likely to blind me," you reply. He laughs and pours something amber into a dirty glass. "Smart man, the cheap stuff's basically poison." "Been working here long?" you ask, pretending to sip. "Long enough to see it all," he replies. "The girls come and go, the sailors come and go, even the buildings come and go. Fire takes one, they build another. Only things that stay the same are the booze and the misery." Through the window, you notice a crowd gathering outside a building down the street. "What's happening there?" The bartender squints. "Ah, that's Kit Burns' place. Probably a rat-baiting match about to start. Your guide, who's been nursing a beer nearby, perks up. You want to see something really Water Street? That's it right there. Rat baiting. You've heard of it. A blood sport where terriers are pitted against rats in a pit, with bets placed on how many rats the dog can kill in a given time. It's outlawed in many places, but thrives in neighborhoods like this. Let's go, you say, curiosity overcoming disgust. As you approach Burns's establishment, a crudely painted sign identifies it as Sportsman's Hall. Men crowd around the entrance, exchanging money and shouting odds. Inside, the place stinks of beer, sweat, and rat. The main attraction is a pit in the center of the room, surrounded by tiered seating that your guide informs you can hold up to 500 spectators. Christopher Kit Burns himself is a portly, jovial-looking man with a pock-marked face who greets newcomers like long-lost friends. When he spots you and your guide, he waves you over. "Gentlemen, come in, come in. You're just in time. Got a new pup making his debut today." Burns shows you to seats near the pit, proudly pointing out his prized possession, a stuffed dog in a glass case. "My black and tan," he explains, eyes misting with nostalgia. "Killed 300 rats in under an hour. Did it easy too. Best dog I ever had." A small, sandy-haired terrier is being prepped at one end of the pit, its handler whispering encouragements. At the other end, a man dumps a squirming sack into a cage. Rats, dozens of them, their pink tails flicking against the bars. 10 cents a rat, Burns announces to the crowd. "Puppy's just learning, but he's got potential. Place your bets." The crowd roars, money changes hands, and you feel your stomach turn. This isn't sport, it's barbarism masquerading as entertainment. "Something wrong, sir?" Burns asks, noticing your expression, not the sporting type. "Just taking it all in," you reply, trying to maintain your cover. "First time's always a shock," Burns says cheerfully. "But rats are vermin, see? Bad for business, bad for health. We're providing a public service, really." The way he says it, you almost believe he believes it. "That Burke fellow's trying to shut me down," Burns continues, suddenly indignant. "Says it's cruel to rats for God's sake, but they're vermin, sir. Always have been." "Burke?" you ask. "Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals," your guide whispers. "New thing. Rich people worried about horses and such." Burns overhears and snorts. "They pray for me every day at the mission house at noon. Not by name, mind you. Poor Kit Burns comes in the general catalogue of wicked, unrepentant sinners." His face twists into an expression of mock piety. Then he bursts into laughter, slapping his knee. A bell rings. The dog is released, and the crowd erupts as it tears into the cage of rats. You look away, but the sounds tell the story. Squeals, growls, the wet snap of small bones. "Isn't this illegal?" you ask your guide under the cover of the crowd's roars. He shrugs. "Probably, but who's going to enforce it here? The cops? Half of them have money on the dog." After what feels like an eternity, another bell rings. The handler retrieves the blood-spattered dog, who prances around proudly as Burns counts the rat carcasses. 17, he announces. Not bad for a first-timer. Money changes hands as bets are settled. Burns catches your eye and grins. "Coming back for the big match Saturday. Got a champion coming in from Brooklyn. They say he can do 100 in 10 minutes. We'll see," you reply non-committally. Outside, you gulp fresh air, though fresh is relative on Water Street. "You all right there?" your guide asks, noticing your pale face. "Some people can't stomach it their first time." "I'm fine," you lie. "Where to next?" Your guide studies you for a moment, then jerks his thumb toward a dingy building down the street. Bucket shop. Might as well see the whole tour. The bucket shop is somehow even more depressing than the rat pit. Men in various stages of dissolution hunch over glasses of cheap liquor, drinking not for pleasure but for oblivion. They call it a bucket shop because you can get a bucket of this stuff for practically nothing, your guide explains. It's not whiskey, though they pretend it is, more like turpentine with tobacco juice for colour. The patrons don't even look up when you enter. They're focused entirely on their drinks, as if the bottom of those glasses holds some answer they've been seeking their whole lives. This is what kills most of them, your guide says quietly. Not the knives or the fights or the diseases, just this. Slow suicide by the glass. You notice a woman in the corner, her once fine dress now tattered and stained. She catches you looking and gives a smile that reveals several missing teeth. "Want to buy a lady a drink, handsome?" she calls. Before you can answer, the door bangs open and a police officer steps in. The atmosphere shifts immediately. Backs straighten, eyes dart to exits. The officer scans the room, then zeroes in on your guide. "You," he says, pointing. "Outside, now." Your guide looks momentarily panicked, then resigned. "Wait here," he mutters to you. "Don't talk to anyone." As he follows the officer outside, you're left alone in a room full of Water Street's most desperate residents. A man sidles up next to you, his breath foul enough to make your eyes water. "First time in the Fourth?" he asks, swaying slightly. "That obvious?" you reply, maintaining your beggar persona but allowing some of your natural accent to slip through. "You got all your teeth and no visible wounds," the man says with a wheezing laugh. "Dead giveaway." "Just looking for work," you say, sticking to your cover story. The man leans closer. "What kind of work? 'Cause I might know people looking for help, specialized help. Good with your hands? You're being recruited for something criminal, theft perhaps, or worse." "Depends on the pay," you reply cautiously. The man grins, revealing gums more prevalent than teeth. "Smart man. Come with me. I'll introduce you to—" The door opens again, and your guide returns, looking shaken but intact. The man beside you melts away into the crowd. "We gotta go," your guide says urgently. "Now." Outside, he pulls you down an alley, checking over his shoulder. "What happened?" you ask. "Cop recognized me from a thing a few years back," he explains vaguely. "Wanted money to forget he saw me. Did you pay him?" "Had to. He knows where I sleep." Your guide runs a hand through his greasy hair. "This is why I don't usually come to the Fourth in daylight. Too many people remember me." "The officer just blackmailed you? Right there in the open?" Your guide laughs bitterly. "Welcome to New York, my friend. The cops are just another gang with badges." When I looked into police corruption in this era, it was eye-opening. There's documented evidence of officers running protection rackets, taking bribes, and even participating in crimes. The line between law enforcement and criminals was basically non-existent in neighborhoods like Water Street. As you walk, your guide points out more landmarks. Brothels thinly disguised as boarding houses, opium dens behind laundries, gambling operations in basements. Water Street isn't just a place, you realize. It's an ecosystem of vice, each establishment feeding into the others in a closed loop of misery. "Or over there's the Oak Street station house," your guide says, nodding toward a relatively solid-looking building, "where they take you if you're lucky enough to get arrested and not just beaten in the street. Is that good luck?" you ask. "Better than being found in the river? Sometimes?" You remember the details from the transcript. In that very station house, Pember once witnessed a sailor charging a boarding house crimp with assault. The crimp had knocked the sailor down and stomped his eye out with a boot heel after the sailor refused to pay an exorbitant fee. Justice was rare here, even with evidence as clear as a missing eye. As afternoon approaches, the character of Water Street shifts. More women appear on street corners. Men stagger from bars, either starting or ending their days drinking. Children, filthy, too thin, with eyes too old for their faces, dart between adults on mysterious errands. "Those kids," you say, nodding toward a group of boys no older than 10 who are eyeing passers-by with predatory focus. "They're pickpockets." "At best," your guide replies. "The younger ones, yeah. The older boys graduate to proper theft, breaking into houses and such. Girls usually end up in the dance houses by 14. The casual way he says it, like he's describing a natural process rather than the systematic destruction of young lives, makes your journalistic blood boil. This is why you're here, disguised and uncomfortable. This is the story that needs telling. I need to see more, you tell your guide, the worst of it. He studies your face. You're either the bravest man I've met or the stupidest. I've been called worse. He sighs. Fine, but we wait till dark. That's when the real Water Street comes alive. As the sun begins its descent toward the harbour, you and your guide find a relatively safe corner to rest. He dozes against a wall while you record observations in your notebook, hiding it whenever someone passes too close. The dancing houses and saloons are lighting up, their windows glowing like diseased eyes in the gathering darkness. Music, discordant, amateur but enthusiastic, spills into the street. Laughter too, though there's an edge to it that speaks more of desperation than joy. Night is falling on Water Street, and with it comes a darkness deeper than the absence of sun. Your guide was right. You've only seen half the story so far. The real horrors are just beginning. All right, that's a good chunk. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. Your guide wakes with a start, instantly alert in the way of men who've learned that deep sleep can be fatal. The street has transformed in the hour since sunset. Gas lamps cast sickly yellow pools that barely push back the darkness, creating more shadows than light. The relative restraint of daytime has evaporated like morning dew, leaving behind the true face of Water Street. "All ready?" your guide asks, watching you carefully. "Last chance to back out. Night's a different beast here. I came for the truth," you reply, adjusting your beggar's disguise. "All of it." He nods, resigned. "Your funeral. Third time I've said that today, starting to think it might be literal." The noise hits you first. Not just volume, but a kind of feverish energy that wasn't present earlier. Shouts, laughter, arguments, music from a dozen different sources, all clashing together in a symphony of desperation. The smell is worse too, as if the night air concentrates rather than disperses the stench of unwashed bodies, spilled alcohol and open sewers. Women who kept to the dance houses during daylight now line the street, calling to passers-by with practiced lines. Men stagger between saloons, growing louder and more dangerous with each drink, and through it all move predators, some obvious with knives visible at their belts, others harder to spot but no less deadly. Most murders happen between midnight and dawn, your guide explains as you walk. By morning, bodies get cleared away. Cops don't even investigate unless the victim's someone important, which nobody in Water Street is. 2 men burst from a saloon, already throwing punches. One pulls a knife, and the street parts around them like water around stones. Nobody interferes. Nobody seems surprised. "Should we do something?" you ask. Your guide snorts. "Yeah, keep walking unless you want to be next." The knife flashes, someone screams, and you force yourself to keep moving. You're here as a witness, not a hero. The story is what matters, the exposure of this hell to the comfortable citizens who pretend it doesn't exist. I spent weeks researching the crime statistics from this period. In 1860s New York, murder was so common in certain areas that newspapers stopped reporting individual cases unless they were particularly gruesome or involved prominent victims. They'd just list numbers at the end of the week. 5 stabbings, 3 shootings, 4 unknown causes. Human life was incredibly cheap. Where to first? Your guide asks. You consider. Those alleyways you pointed out earlier, single and double, I want to see inside. He gives you a strange look. You sure? Not much to see, but misery stacked floor to ceiling. That's exactly what I need to document. Single alley is aptly named, a narrow passage between buildings with just one face to the street. The entrance is barely wide enough for 2 people to pass, and the smell that wafts out makes your eyes water. Human waste, rotting food, and the unmistakable sweet, sour odour of disease. 70 families in there, your guide says, nodding toward the dark moor. 1 privy in the back, no running water, no ventilation. And double alley? Same deal, but twice as big. 140 families, give or take. They take in lodgers too, so figure close to 1,000 people packed in there. You do the math in your head? That's at least 5 people per room, often more, in spaces barely larger than closets. I need to see inside. You insist. Your guide shakes his head. Your coins won't help you in there. Strangers don't come out of those places after dark, especially not ones who look like they might have money. But he thinks for a moment, then points to a decrepit 3-story building across the street. Old boarding house there. Similar setup, but smaller. Owner might let us in for the right price. The boarding house looks like it's one strong wind away from collapse. Paint peels from the exterior like diseased skin. Windows are patched with paper or cloth where glass should be, and the front steps sag alarmingly under your weight. Your guide knocks a complex pattern on the door. After a long pause, it opens a crack and an eye peers out. What do you want? A voice rasps. Got a gentleman here wants a tour? Your guide says, paying cash. The door opens wider, revealing a hunched man with a face like crumpled paper. $5, he says immediately. It's an outrageous sum, but you nod. The man's eyebrows rise slightly. You've just confirmed you have money, but he steps back to let you in. The smell inside hits you like a physical force. Your eyes water and you fight the urge to gag. The narrow hallway is lit by a single guttering candle that does more to emphasize the darkness than dispel it. 3rd floor's the worst, the man says, mistaking your purpose. If you're looking for young ones. You realize with a jolt what he thinks you're here for. Just looking around, you say quickly. Research. The man gives you a knowing leer. Call it whatever you want, mister. $5 buys you a tour and privacy. What happens after ain't my business. You press the money into his palm and he gestures toward a rickety staircase. Help yourself. Knock before entering or you might get a knife for your trouble. As you climb the stairs, the wood groaning beneath your feet, your guide whispers, he thinks you're shopping for company. I gathered. Play along, safer that way. The 1st floor is divided into tiny rooms, doors half open to reveal cramped spaces occupied by multiple people. In one, a family of 6 sits on a single mattress, sharing what looks like a loaf of bread. In another, 2 women sew by candlelight, their fingers moving with mechanical precision despite the dim light. A child, perhaps 4 years old, stares at you from a doorway, her face smudged with dirt and something darker that might be blood. When you meet her eyes, she doesn't look away or show any emotion. There's a hollowness there that no child should possess. The second floor is worse. The rooms are smaller, the occupants more numerous. The air is thicker too, heavy with the smell of unwashed bodies, cooking grease, and the sickly sweet odour of consumption. Tuberculosis, the disease that thrives in crowded, unsanitary conditions. A coughing fit erupts from behind one door, the violent, tearing sound of lungs fighting for air. Nobody reacts. It's background noise here, as common as the creaking floorboards. Third floor, your guide murmurs, nudging you toward the final staircase. As you climb, you hear noises that make your skin crawl. A woman's forced laughter, a man's grunt, a child crying softly, continuously, hopelessly. The third floor is where they keep the hopeless cases, the women too old or sick to work the streets, but young enough to serve the most desperate customers, the children sold by parents who couldn't feed them, the opium addicts who lie on bare mattresses in a half-conscious daze. A girl who can't be more than 12 leans against a doorframe. Her eyes are adult, assessing, dead. "Looking for company, mister?" she asks in a practiced voice. You shake your head, unable to speak past the lump of rage in your throat. "2 bits, she continues, as if you'd shown interest. "Cheapest you'll find. 2 bits, 25 cents, for what remains of her childhood. You want to grab her, run out of this hellhole, take her somewhere safe." But there is nowhere safe, not for her kind, not in this city. When I researched this period, what shocked me most were the accounts of child prostitution. Social reformers who ventured into these areas routinely found children as young as 10 working in brothels. What's worse is how normalized it was, not accepted as good, but accepted as inevitable, like bad weather or disease, just another fact of life in the slums. You press $1 into her hand, not for services, just because you can't do nothing. "Get some food," you whisper. Her expression doesn't change, but she pockets the money with practiced speed. "Room at the end is empty," she says, assuming you want privacy for whatever you paid her for. Instead, you move to a window at the end of the hall. From this vantage point, 3 stories up, you can see the patchwork of misery that makes up the 4th ward. Dance houses, saloons, and brothels form islands of light in the darkness. Between them flow rivers of humanity, drunk, desperate, dangerous. "Can you imagine growing up here?" you ask your guide quietly. "Don't have to imagine," he replies. "Born 2 blocks over." You turn to look at him with new understanding. "How did you get out?" "Who says I got out?" He laughs bitterly. "I'm still here, ain't I? Just learned to navigate better than most. Learned who to avoid, who to pay, when to run." In the street below, a fight erupts outside a saloon. Even from this height, you can hear the crack as a bottle breaks over someone's head. The victim drops like a stone, and the attacker goes through his pockets before anyone can intervene. "We should go," your guide says. "Seen enough?" "Almost." You turn from the window. "I need to understand how the police fit into all this. They can't all be corrupt." "Follow me," your guide says with a grim smile. "I'll show you exactly how the law works in Water Street." Back on the street, the night has deepened, but the activity has only increased. Your guide leads you to a saloon that, from the outside, looks no different from the dozens of others you've passed. Inside, however, the clientele is unexpected. Uniformed police officers fill half the tables, drinking alongside the very criminals they should be arresting. Money changes hands openly, not for drinks, but for what are clearly payoffs. A burly sergeant laughs with a man you recognize as a bouncer from one of the dance houses, both of them counting cash under the table. "Monthly collection," your guide explains in a low voice. "Brothels, gambling dens, dance houses, they all pay for protection, not from criminals, from the law itself. They're just taking bribes in the open? Who's gonna stop 'em? The other cops? He snorts. System works for everybody except the poor bastards at the bottom. A man in plain clothes but with the unmistakable bearing of authority enters, and the room subtly shifts. Conversations pause, eyes lower, postures straighten. "Captain," your guide whispers. "Precinct boss? His take's bigger than all the rest combined." The captain scans the room, his gaze passing over you without interest. You're just another Water Street degenerate as far as he's concerned. He takes a seat at a reserved table in the back, and immediately several envelope-bearing men approach to pay their respects. And their bribes. "Elections coming up," your guide continues. "Cops make sure the right votes get counted, the wrong ones disappear. Politicians return the favour by keeping the right cops in the right places." "The whole system is corrupt," you murmur. Now you're getting it. A commotion at the door draws your attention. 2 officers drag in a struggling man, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. "Caught him stealing from Kit Burns's place," one officer announces to the room. The captain barely looks up. Usual treatment. The officers grin and drag their captive toward the back door, presumably to an alley where they can dispense their version of justice without witnesses. "Should have known better," your guide says, shaking his head. "Burns pays triple what most places do. Stealing from him's practically suicide." As you watch the illicit commerce continue, a horrible thought strikes you. "The body we saw this morning," you ask, "the one they just carted away without investigation, was that?" "Probably. Could have been someone who didn't pay protection, or stole from the wrong person, or just looked at someone wrong. Doesn't take much around here." Suddenly, the captain's gaze locks onto your guide, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Time to go," your guide says urgently. "Now." You slip out the side door just as you hear the captain's voice calling for your guide by name. Outside, you don't walk. You run, following your guide down a maze of alleys until you're sure no one is following. "That was close," he pants, leaning against a wall. "Captain knows me from way back, knows I don't come around unless I'm showing someone the sights." Would he really have arrested you? "Arrested?" Your guide laughs breathlessly. "No, that costs money. Beaten senseless and dumped in the river more likely." You've both stopped in a relatively quiet street. The buildings here are just as dilapidated, but there are fewer saloons, more residences. From an upper window comes the sound of a baby wailing, high and desperate. "This is where families live," your guide explains, recovering his composure. "The ones trying to stay decent anyway. Work the docks, the factories, whatever they can find." As if on cue, a door opens and a man in workman's clothes emerges. He looks exhausted, shoulders slumped under an invisible weight. "Night shift," your guide explains. "Poor bastard probably works 16 hours a day, comes home to a place not much better than that boarding house, tries to keep his family fed." "How do they survive?" you ask. Some don't. Some turn to crime eventually. Some just endure, get up every day and do it all again until they can't anymore. The man trudges past you without a glance, his eyes fixed on the ground, his mind perhaps on the long night ahead, or the hungry children he's leaving behind. "Come on," your guide says. "One more stop. Gotta be quick though. Captain might have people looking for us." He leads you to a building that, despite its shabby exterior, has a certain dignity lacking in its neighbours. A small sign identifies it as a mission house. Religious folks, your guide explains, set these up to save souls. Mostly they just provide a warm place to sit, and some soup if you're willing to listen to preaching. Inside, a small group has gathered, mostly women and a few elderly men. A grey-haired preacher stands at the front, reading from a Bible by lamplight. His voice is hoarse but passionate as he describes the rewards awaiting the faithful in heaven. For most of these people, your guide whispers, the promise of a better afterlife is the only hope they've got. You scan the faces of the congregation, worn, tired, but somehow still holding on to something. Faith, perhaps, or just the simple comfort of being somewhere warm and relatively safe for an hour. None of the notorious figures you've encountered today. Not Tommy Haddon. Not Kit Burns. Not the dance house proprietors are present. The mission's reach extends only to those already at the bottom, not to those who profit from putting them there. They try, your guide says, with surprising gentleness. These church folks, they just don't understand. Telling someone who's starving that God loves them doesn't fill their belly. Telling a girl who's been on the streets since she was 12 that Jesus forgives her doesn't give her anywhere else to go. A woman near the back notices you watching and meets your gaze. There's no hope in her eyes, no faith despite the sermon washing over her, just a dull acceptance of her lot. I interviewed a historian who specialized in reform movements of this era. She told me these missions were well-intentioned but profoundly inadequate, like trying to empty the ocean with a teacup. The systemic problems were too big, too entrenched. Without addressing poverty, housing, education, and corruption, no amount of preaching could make a meaningful difference. You've seen enough for one night, your guide says, tugging your sleeve. Any more and we're pushing our luck. Outside, the streets have grown marginally quieter as the very drunkest have passed out and the slightly more sensible have found beds or companions for the night. But danger still lurks in every shadow, and your guide keeps you moving at a brisk pace away from the mission, deeper into the warren of streets that make up the Fourth Ward. Where are we going? You ask, realizing you've lost your bearings in the tangle of identical dilapidated streets. Oh, safe house, he replies cryptically. Can't take you back to your hotel looking like that, and can't stay on the streets all night, not after the captain saw us. As you turn a corner, a figure detaches from the shadows ahead, a police officer, billy club already drawn. You there! He calls. Stop where you are. Your guide freezes, then whispers from the corner of his mouth. When I move, run. Don't look back. Don't stop. Head for the docks. Before you can respond, he shouts. It's a raid at the top of his lungs. Doors fly open up and down the street as people scatter, creating instant chaos. Your guide shoves you hard in one direction and bolts in another. The officer hesitates, confused by the sudden explosion of activity, and in that moment, you run. Behind you, a whistle blows, the officer calling for backup. Ahead, more figures are emerging from the darkness. You dart down an alley, heart pounding, your fine Oxford education suddenly worth less than a pair of fast legs. The docks loom ahead, a forest of masts and rigging silhouetted against the night sky. Somewhere in that maze of ships and warehouses, you might find safety, at least until morning. But as you emerge from the alley, a heavy hand falls on your shoulder, spinning you around. You find yourself face to face with a mountain of a man in police uniform, his expression somewhere between amusement and contempt. Well, he says, his breath reeking of whiskey and tobacco. What do we have here? All right, that's a good chunk. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. The officer's grip tightens on your shoulder, fingers digging into your collarbone. His face is a road map of broken veins and old scars, eyes bloodshot but alert. You consider your options. Running seems impossible, fighting suicidal. Just looking for work, officer, you mumble, deepening your fake American accent, slouching into your beggar disguise. "Funny," he says, not sounding amused. "Captain wants to talk to someone matching your description, someone asking questions they shouldn't." Your heart sinks. Word travels fast in Water Street. "You got the wrong fellow," you insist. "I'm just passing through." He studies you for a long moment, then a slow, unpleasant smile spreads across his face. "Empty your pockets." You hesitate. In your right pocket is the money you've been using to bribe your way through Water Street. In your left is your notebook, the most damning evidence of your true purpose here. "I said," he repeats, raising his club, "empty them." You reach for your right pocket first, removing a handful of coins and crumpled bills. The officer's eyes light up with naked greed. "That's a lot of cash for a beggar," he observes, plucking the money from your hand. "Where'd you steal it?" "Didn't steal it," you protest weakly. "Saved up." "Other pocket," he demands, already pocketing your money. You reach slowly for your left pocket, mind racing for a solution. The notebook will give you away instantly. No beggar carries detailed observations of criminal operations. As your fingers close around it, a shout echoes from nearby, followed by a crash. The officer's head turns instinctively toward the sound. In that split second, you make your decision. Instead of removing the notebook, you drive your knee upward with all your strength. It connects satisfyingly with the officer's groin. He folds like a house of cards, gasping. You don't wait to see him recover. You run faster than you've ever run in your life, plunging into the maze of warehouses along the waterfront. Behind you, a whistle shrieks once, twice, 3 times, the universal police signal for assistance. You duck into a narrow space between buildings, pressing yourself against rough brick, trying to quiet your thundering heart and ragged breathing. Footsteps pound past your hiding place, more than one set. They pause at the intersection ahead, voices muttering in confusion. Then they split up, moving in different directions, hunting. You've never felt more foreign, more out of place. Your Oxford education, your London journalism career, your proper upbringing, none of it helps you now in this primordial urban jungle where only the cunning survive. When the footsteps fade, you creep from your hiding spot, moving deeper into the warehouse district. Most buildings are locked tight, but eventually you find one with a broken window at ground level. You squeeze through, ignoring the glass that tears at your already ragged clothes, and find yourself in near total darkness. The warehouse smells of coffee beans and rat droppings. You fumble your way to what feels like a stack of burlap sacks and collapse behind them, finally allowing your trembling legs to rest. Sleep comes in fitful bursts, interrupted by nightmares of pursuit and the very real sounds of rats scurrying nearby. You wake fully as grey dawn light filters through high windows, illuminating your temporary sanctuary. The warehouse is indeed filled with coffee sacks. Hundreds of them, stacked nearly to the ceiling. Your body aches from the hard floor and yesterday's exertions. Your fine clothes, disguised beneath beggar's rags, are filthy. Your face, when you touch it, feels rough with stubble. The transformation from gentleman journalist to actual Water Street denizen is becoming less of a disguise and more of a reality. With daylight comes a new problem. You can't stay here, but you also can't return to your hotel looking like this. You need your guide, but have no idea how to find him. For all you know, he's been caught by the police himself. You peer through a crack in the warehouse door. The dockside is already busy with workers unloading ships, carrying crates, shouting orders. Among them, you spot the occasional blue uniform of a police officer, presumably still hunting for you. You're effectively trapped, and your stomach reminds you with an angry growl that you haven't eaten since yesterday afternoon. This is no longer just an investigative exercise. You're experiencing the actual desperation of Water Street's residents, hungry, hunted, with nowhere safe to go. For the next few hours, you watch the docks through your crack in the door, observing the rhythm of the place. Ships arrive, are unloaded or loaded, depart. Men sweat and curse under heavy burdens. Foremen shout orders. Police patrol casually, more interested in the occasional free drink from merchants than in actual law enforcement. You see men who look like your guide, rough types who aren't dock workers but somehow belong here, moving through the crowds with practiced ease, occasionally exchanging small packages or whispered conversations. Water Street's underground economy at work. By mid-morning, your thirst has become nearly unbearable. You've spotted a water pump near one of the piers, used by workers to wash and drink. If you're careful, you might reach it without being noticed. You wait for a particularly busy moment when a large shipment is being unloaded and everyone's attention is directed elsewhere, then slip out the door. You keep your head down, shoulders hunched, moving with the shuffling gait of someone who expects to be kicked at any moment. No one gives you a second glance. You're just another Water Street derelict, invisible in your misery. The water from the pump is brackish and tastes faintly of rust, but it's the sweetest thing you've ever drunk. You fill your cupped hands again and again, slaking a thirst you hadn't fully acknowledged until now. "Hey you," a gruff voice calls. Your heart stops, but when you turn, it's not a policeman, but a burly dock foreman. Need a man for unloading, 2 bits for the morning. He's offering you work, actual, legitimate work. The irony doesn't escape you. Your disguise is so convincing that you're being mistaken for one of the desperate men who gather at the docks each morning, hoping for a day's labour. "Yes," you say, realizing this is perfect cover. "I'll work." The next 4 hours are a lesson in physical misery. You're assigned to a team unloading crates of machine parts, heavy, awkward, with sharp edges that tear at your hands. Your back screams in protest, your shoulders burn, your palms blister and then bleed. The other workers, men who do this every day, give you pitying glances but offer no help. Here, it's every man for himself. By noon, you've earned your 25 cents and a grudging respect from the foreman, who initially thought you wouldn't last an hour. More importantly, you've had time to think, to plan your next move. "Coming back tomorrow?" the foreman asks as he pays you. "Maybe," you reply non-committally. "Got a name?" You hesitate, then decide truth is simpler than fiction. "Arthur." He nods, already turning away. "See you around, Arthur." With coins in your pocket, a pittance compared to what the officer stole, but better than nothing, you venture back toward Water Street. Your plan is simple. Find food, then find somewhere to clean up enough that you can eventually make your way back to your hotel without arousing suspicion. Water Street by day is marginally less threatening than by night, but no less miserable. You pass women emptying chamber pots into gutters already flowing with filth. Children play in the same gutters, immune or oblivious to the health hazards surrounding them. Men drink openly at 10 in the morning, numbing themselves for another day of hardship. You find a vendor selling what he claims is beef stew from a cart. The meat is tough and of questionable origin, the broth watery, but it's hot and filling. As you eat, standing in a doorway out of the main flow of traffic, you observe Water Street's daytime economy. It's a parallel world with its own rules. Money changes hands for goods and services, both legal and illegal. Credit is extended or denied based on criteria known only to the sellers. Fights break out and are resolved without police intervention. It's a community of sorts, albeit one built on shared misery rather than mutual benefit. A boy of perhaps 10 approaches, eyeing your stew with naked hunger. His face is gaunt, his clothes even more ragged than your disguise. You silently offer your bowl, still half full. He snatches it and retreats to a safe distance before wolfing down the remaining food. When I dug into historical accounts of childhood in these slums, the descriptions were heartbreaking. Kids as young as 5 or 6 were expected to contribute to the family income. They became beggars, thieves, or took dangerous jobs no adult would touch. Their life expectancy was shockingly short. Many didn't reach adulthood due to disease, accidents, or violence. The boy finishes eating and looks up, meeting your gaze. There's no gratitude in his expression, just the wary calculation of someone always looking for the next meal, the next opportunity, the next threat. "You need work?" he asks suddenly. "My pa knows people." "What kind of work?" you ask cautiously. The boy shrugs. "Different kinds. Depends what you're good at." You recognize a recruitment attempt when you hear one, likely for the same criminal enterprises you've been investigating. Even children are part of the system here. "I'm just passing through," you say gently, "but thanks." The boy doesn't seem offended. He simply nods and disappears into the crowd, already looking for someone else to approach. As noon turns to afternoon, you continue wandering, keeping a careful eye out for police while trying to get your bearings. You pass a building you recognize, the Oak Street Station House, where you began your Water Street journey before everything went sideways. A commotion at the station house door catches your attention. A group of men are dragging a bloodied sailor into the building. His face is a mess, and most disturbingly, where his left eye should be is just a bloody socket. I checked police records from this period, and they're full of similar reports. Horrific injuries barely investigated, especially when the victims were sailors or immigrants. The concept of civil rights was basically non-existent for the poor. You drift closer, adopting the casual interest of a street dweller with nothing better to do. The sailor is shouting accusations at another man, presumably his attacker, who is being held by 2 friends straining to get at the injured man. "He stamped my eye out," the sailor roars, "knocked me down and stamped it right out with his boot." "Lying Navy scum," the other man shouts back. "You tried to skip on your bill." You recognize the type immediately from your research. A boarding house crimp, one of those men who provide lodging to sailors at extortionate rates, often through deception. When the sailors can't pay, violence typically follows. A crowd gathers as the men are taken inside, the entertainment value of the spectacle briefly overcoming Water Street's usual every man for himself mentality. You hear people placing bets on whether the crimp will face charges or be released. "10 says he walks," a man next to you mutters to his companion. "His cousin's on the force." "No bet," his friend replies. "Justice is for people with money." As the crowd disperses, you notice a familiar face across the street, your guide, looking considerably worse for wear, but very much alive. He spots you at the same moment and jerks his head slightly, indicating an alley nearby. Once safely out of sight, he looks you up and down and lets out a low whistle. "You look like hell." "You're not much better," you reply, noting his split lip and the bruise darkening his left cheek. "Had a disagreement with a gentleman of the law," he says with a crooked smile. "Seems they don't appreciate our tour of their business operations. Are they still looking for us?" He shrugs. "For you, maybe. I'm small fry, just got a beating and a warning. You, though, Captain's real interested in the fancy English journalist slumming it in disguise." Your blood runs cold. "How?" Word gets around. "Tommy Haddon made you yesterday morning. Said no real beggar asks the questions you were asking. This changes everything. If your cover is blown, continuing the investigation becomes exponentially more dangerous." "I need to get back to my hotel," you say. "Clean up, regroup." Your guide nods. "Got a plan for that. Follow me, but stay back a bit. I'll signal if the coast is clear." He leads you through a bewildering series of alleys and side streets, occasionally stopping to check for followers or police. Eventually, you reach a nondescript building that turns out to be a public bathhouse, one of the few in the area. 2 bits gets you hot water and soap, your guide explains. Worth every penny. You clean up, I'll find you some clothes that won't scream gentleman in disguise. The bathhouse is basic but functional, a series of private stalls with metal tubs, a far cry from London's elegant bathing establishments, but heaven after your recent experiences. The hot water turns grey almost immediately as you scrub away the accumulated filth of Water Street. As promised, your guide returns with clothes, simple workman's attire that will help you blend in better than either your gentlemanly clothes or the beggar disguise. "What now?" he asks as you emerge, transformed once again. "I'm not finished," you say firmly. "I came for the story, and I'm going to get it." He looks at you like you've lost your mind. They know who you are now. It's not safe. It never was, you point out. But now I need to be smarter about it. Less direct observation, more interviews. Your guide's eyebrows rise. Interviews? With who? Anyone who'll talk. Former residents who've gotten out, police who might be sympathetic to reform, religious workers from the missions. He considers this, then nods slowly. Might work. Less dangerous than wandering around Water Street at night anyway. Can you help me find people to talk to? Maybe, for the right price. His entrepreneurial spirit remains undimmed by your recent troubles. You count your remaining money. Pitifully little after the police officer's theft. I'll need to get more cash from my hotel. Risky, your guide warns. They might be watching it. He has a point. The corrupt police of Water Street would think nothing of staking out a hotel to catch a troublesome journalist. Then I need to get a message to my editor at the Tribune, you say. Let him know what's happening, get some funds. Your guide scratches his chin thoughtfully. I know a kid who can run messages, reliable, fast, and knows how to be invisible. Cost you, though. How much? $1 for him, $1 for me for setting it up. It's steep but necessary. You hand over your last $2, then scribble a note to your editor on a page from your notebook, explaining your situation and requesting funds. Where will I find you after? You ask as your guide pockets the note and money. Boarding house on Cherry Street. Grey door, brass knocker. Knock 3 times, then 2. Say Mike sent you. With that, he disappears into the crowd, leaving you alone once again in the unforgiving world of Water Street. But now you have a plan, a direction, and more importantly, a growing understanding of how this place truly functions. You spend the afternoon carefully making your way toward Cherry Street, avoiding main thoroughfares where police might be watching. The streets here are marginally better than Water Street proper, still poor, still dangerous, but with a higher proportion of working families versus outright criminals. Women hang laundry from windows, the meagre garments flapping like surrender flags in the breeze. Children play games with sticks and stones that have rules known only to them. Men sit on stoops, smoking pipes or simply staring into the distance with the vacant eyes of the chronically exhausted. This is the working poor's Water Street. People one missed paycheck away from the dance houses or criminal gangs clinging desperately to whatever respectability they can maintain. Their struggle is different from the outright criminality you witnessed before, but no less deadly in its way. They fight against time, against illness, against the grinding machinery of poverty that wears them down day by day. You pass a woman teaching her daughter to sew by the light of their open door, her needle flashing in the sun as she demonstrates a stitch. The girl, perhaps 7, watches with solemn concentration. This is her inheritance, not land or money or education, but the skills to barely survive in a world stacked against her. As evening approaches, bringing with it the more dangerous elements of Water Street life, you finally locate the boarding house. Grey door, brass knocker, just as described. You knock 3 times, then 2, and wait, hoping your guide's message has already reached your editor at the Tribune. The door opens a crack and a woman's face appears, lined with age and hardship, but with eyes that miss nothing. "Mike sent me," you say quietly. She nods once and steps back, opening the door just wide enough for you to slip inside. The hallway beyond is dark, the air heavy with the smell of boiled cabbage and too many people in too little space, but compared to what you've seen, it feels almost welcoming. "Room at the top," she says, her voice raspy from what might be illness or might be gin. "Don't make noise. Don't bring trouble." You climb the narrow stairs, each step creaking alarmingly beneath your weight. At the top floor, a single door stands ajar. Inside is a tiny room with a narrow bed, a cracked wash basin, and a chair missing one leg propped against the wall to stay upright. It's hardly luxury, but it's private and relatively clean, a safe harbour in the storm of Water Street. Through the room's single window, you can see the neighbourhood spreading below you, the first lamps being lit as darkness falls. Tomorrow, you'll continue your investigation, but with a new approach. Tonight, you'll rest, record your observations in your notebook, and prepare for whatever Water Street throws at you next. Because despite the danger, despite nearly being caught, despite everything you've seen, you know one thing with absolute certainty: this story needs to be told. All right, that's a good chunk. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. You wake to the sound of church bells, distant, muffled, but unmistakable. Sunday morning in Water Street. Through your grimy window, the sky is the colour of dirty dishwater, promising rain later. Your body aches from yesterday's dock work, muscles protesting every movement as you rise from the thin mattress. Your room in the boarding house smells of old cabbage and mildew, but after 2 days in Water Street, your nose has begun to adjust to the general miasma. You splash water on your face from the cracked basin, the coolness momentarily refreshing against your skin. A knock at the door makes you tense. You've been jumpy since your encounter with the police yesterday. "Who is it?" you call, reaching for the small knife you found in the room and tucked under your pillow, a previous occupant's forgotten protection. "Message," comes a boy's voice. You open the door cautiously. A skinny kid of maybe 12 stands there, cap pulled low over his eyes, hands thrust deep in his pockets. "You the English fellow?" he asks. "Perhaps. Who's asking?" He rolls his eyes at your caution. "Got something for you from the Tribune." He pulls a small envelope from his pocket and holds it out, adding, "Mike says to tell you he'll be by at noon." The boy disappears down the stairs before you can ask anything else. You close the door and examine the envelope. Inside are $10, a small fortune in Water Street terms, and a brief note from your editor. "Pember, situation understood, funds enclosed. Be careful, story sounds promising. Expect full report when safe. GS." The money represents both safety and opportunity. You can pay for your room, buy food, compensate potential interviewees, and most importantly, avoid the desperate choices that drive so many Water Street residents to crime or worse. Unlike your comfortable bed at home, where you can drift back to sleep on lazy mornings, here in Water Street, rest is a luxury few can afford. Your stomach growls, reminding you that food is the first priority. You tuck most of the money into your boot, the safest place in Water Street, and keep a small amount in your pocket for immediate needs. The landlady is in the narrow hallway when you descend the stairs, sweeping with short, angry strokes. Her face is a map of hard years, but her eyes are sharp and alert. "Rent's due daily," she says without preamble. 50 cents. It's steep for such a small room, but safety has its price. You pay without complaint. Any place nearby to get breakfast, you ask. She eyes you with slightly more interest. Most of her lodgers probably don't eat regular meals. Dutch Mary's on the corner, cheap, won't kill you, probably. The streets are quieter on Sunday morning. Some businesses are closed in nominal observation of the Sabbath, though you notice the saloons and dance houses show no sign of interrupting their trade. A group of children play in the gutter, fashioning toys from discarded trash. They look up as you pass, eyes calculating your worth, your threat level, your potential as a mark. Dutch Mary's turns out to be a narrow storefront with a few wobbly tables inside. The air is thick with the smell of frying fat and strong coffee. A massive woman with arms like hams presides over a cast-iron stove, barking orders at a terrified-looking girl who might be her daughter. "Sit anywhere that don't look ready to collapse," Mary calls when you enter. Menus: eggs, bread and coffee, sometimes bacon. Today, no bacon. You take a seat at a table that wobbles only slightly. The coffee comes in a chipped mug, black as sin and nearly as thick. The eggs are greasy but hot, the bread surprisingly fresh. For 15 cents, it's the best meal you've had since arriving in Water Street. As you eat, you observe the other patrons, dock workers mostly, fueling up before or after shifts, a few shopkeepers from the marginally more respectable streets nearby. They talk quietly among themselves, conversations revolving around work, money, and the constant struggle to obtain both. One man catches your attention, older, with a neat grey beard and surprisingly clean clothes. He sits alone, nursing his coffee with the air of a ritual long established. There's something in his posture, his careful movements, that suggests he wasn't born to Water Street, but arrived here through some reversal of fortune. You approach his table, coffee in hand. "Mind if I join you?" He looks up, assessing you with intelligent eyes. "Free country," he says finally, "for some." You sit, introducing yourself with your real first name, but a false surname. No need to advertise your journalist identity just yet. "Caleb Morrison," he replies, offering a hand that, despite its calluses, shows traces of once having been genteel. "What brings you to this particular circle of hell?" "Research," you say carefully. "I'm interested in how people live here." "Research?" His eyebrow rises. "You a reformer, or one of those missionary types?" "Just a curious observer." He snorts. "Ain't nothing worth observing here except human misery, and that gets old fast, trust me. You speak like someone who's seen better places." Morrison eyes you carefully, then seems to make a decision. "Had a business once, printing, good trade. Then came the Panic of '57. Banks failed, loans called in, lost everything." He shrugs as if to say it hardly matters now. "Been here 8 years. You adapt or you die." "How did you adapt?" you ask, genuinely curious. "Or found a niche. I can still read and write better than most around here. I write letters for people, help with contracts, sometimes teach the children whose parents care enough to want them educated. A scribe, the ancient profession of the literate in a largely illiterate community." It's a clever adaptation, using skills from his former life to survive in his new one. "Would you be willing to tell me more about how things work here? The economics of it, the social structures? I can pay for your time." Morrison studies you more intently now. "You're not just curious, are you? You're writing about us." You hesitate, then decide honesty might be the best approach. "Yes, I believe people should know what life is really like here." "A journalist," he says, not a question but a statement. "Figured as much. You have that look, like you're always watching, always filing things away. Will you help?" He considers this, taking a slow sip of his coffee. $5 for a full day. I'll show you things the tour guides won't. Introduce you to people who actually live here, not just profit from it. But I have conditions, which are no last names in whatever you write. These people have little enough dignity left, and no false charity. Don't pretend you're going to save anyone. His terms are reasonable. You agree readily, and Morrison nods, seemingly satisfied. Meet me here at 1. Your friend Mike will be looking for you at noon, I believe? The reminder startles you. How did you? Walls are thin in the boarding house, Morrison explains with a slight smile, and news travels fast when someone new arrives. At noon precisely, Mike, your original guide, appears at the boarding house. He looks better than yesterday, his split lip less swollen, though the bruise on his cheek has darkened to an impressive purple. Got your message to the Tribune? He says without preamble. Money come through? Yes. Thank you. You hand him the $3 you promised. 2 for the service, 1 as a bonus. Sweet. He grins, pocketing the cash. So, you really going through with this? More investigating? Different approach, less wandering, more talking. I've arranged a guide, Caleb Morrison. Mike's eyebrows shoot up. Old man Morrison? Huh? Good choice, actually. He knows everybody and nobody bothers him much. Too useful. He mentioned showing me things you wouldn't. Mike laughs. Probably true. I showed you what pays. The cribs, the dance halls, the rough stuff. Morrison will show you how people actually live here when they're not drinking or whoring or getting rolled by cops. Is that why you brought me to those places first? Because that's what pays? His expression turns serious. Took you there because that's what people want to read about. Murder and vice sells papers. Nobody wants to read about a mother stretching a half-pound of beans to feed 6 kids for a week. There's uncomfortable truth in his words. Sensation sells. Everyday misery rarely makes headlines. Will you be around if I need you again? You ask. Always around, Mike shrugs. Water Street's home. Just ask for me at Paddy's on James Street if you need anything. He tips his cap and saunters off, somehow projecting confidence despite his battered appearance. At 1 o'clock, you meet Morrison at Dutch Mary's as arranged. He's traded his coffee for a small notebook and pencil, the tools of his trade. First lesson about Water Street economics, he says as you walk. Everything has a price, but rarely a fixed one. What you pay depends on who you are, who you know, and what you can offer besides money. He leads you down streets you've seen before, but now you're seeing them through a different lens. Not as a horrified observer of depravity, but as a student of survival. See that woman? Morrison nods toward a heavy-set matron haggling fiercely with a vegetable seller. She buys the damaged produce at the end of market day, cuts away the bad parts, sells what's left at a markup to people who can't get to the market themselves, makes maybe 30 cents profit on a good day. The woman completes her transaction, loading bruised vegetables into a large basket. Her face shows neither joy nor despair, just the blank determination of someone doing what needs doing. And him? Morrison indicates a man collecting scraps of coal that have fallen from delivery wagons, sells bags of coal pieces to people who can't afford proper fuel. 10 cents a bag, probably makes more on a cold day than I do in a week. Throughout the afternoon, Morrison points out dozens of these micro-economies, the rag pickers who sort through garbage for anything saleable, the water carriers who bring relatively clean water from public pumps to tenements without it, the menders who patch clothing until the original fabric is barely visible beneath repairs. Most people have 3 or 4 hustles going at once, Morrison explains. The regular work, if they're lucky enough to have it, the side business for extra pennies, the favour economy, doing things for neighbours in exchange for help when needed, and often something not quite legal for when times get desperate. You pass a woman teaching 3 young children in the doorway of a tenement. She has no books, just a slate with letters chalked on it. Neighbourhood school, Morrison explains. 3 cents a week per child. She teaches reading, basic sums, a little history, more education than most of these kids would get otherwise. Is she a former teacher, you ask, noting the woman's methodical approach. Former lady's maid to an educated family, picked up enough to pass it on, better than nothing. Education, or the lack of it, is clearly a key factor in the cycle of poverty. Without basic literacy or numeracy, the children of Water Street have little hope of escaping their circumstances. A sudden commotion draws your attention. A crowd has gathered around a tenement entrance, voices raised in anger and distress. Morrison frowns and quickens his pace. "Eviction," he mutters as you get closer. Bastards don't even wait for the rain to stop. Indeed, it has begun to drizzle, a cold, insistent mist that somehow penetrates clothing more thoroughly than a proper downpour. On the street in front of the tenement sits a pitiful collection of furniture, a mattress already darkening with moisture, a 3-legged table, a few cooking pots, and some bundles of clothing. Beside them stands a family, mother, father, 3 small children, all watching their meagre possessions succumb to the weather. 2 weeks behind on rent, a bystander tells Morrison. Landlord's nephew wants the room for his new wife. The father, a thin man with hollow cheeks and defeat in his eyes, clutches a battered suitcase as if it contains treasures rather than likely just more ragged clothes. The mother holds an infant to her chest, trying to shield it from the rain with her shawl. The older children, perhaps 5 and 7, stand silent and solemn-faced, already learning that tears serve no purpose in Water Street. I interviewed a housing historian about evictions in this period. She explained there were virtually no protections for tenants. Evictions could happen without notice, often violently and frequently in bad weather when the landlord knew the family would be most desperate and least able to resist. "What will happen to them?" you ask Morrison quietly. If they're lucky, a relative or friend takes them in until they find another place. If not, he doesn't finish the thought, but the implications are clear. The streets of New York are no place for children, especially not in the colder months. Almost without conscious thought, you step forward, addressing the father. "I have a room," you say. "It's small, but you're welcome to it for tonight, until you find something else." The man stares at you with suspicion. Charity is rare enough in Water Street to be treated with distrust. Morrison puts a hand on your arm. "A noble gesture," he says quietly, "but not a practical one. Your landlady won't allow a family of 5 in a single room. The noise alone would get them thrown out by midnight." Before you can respond, another woman pushes through the crowd. "Sarah," she calls to the evicted mother, "you'll come to us. Jacob can take the boys to his brother's, just until you find a new place." Relief washes over the family's faces. They have been saved, at least temporarily, by the community's fragile safety net. "That's Widow Jenkins," Morrison explains as the crowd begins to disperse, the drama concluded. "She takes in women and children when there's trouble. Been doing it for years. No one knows how she affords it. Simple charity, you suggest?" Morrison gives you a look that suggests your naivety is showing. Nothing simple in Water Street. Everything has a price, maybe not in money, but in obligation, in future favours, in loyalty. The widow builds her own safety net, one rescued family at a time. The rain intensifies as afternoon slides toward evening. You and Morrison take shelter in a small tavern, not one of the rowdy saloons you visited with Mike, but a quieter establishment catering to the working poor rather than sailors or criminals. Men and a few women sit at scarred tables, nursing beers that they make last for hours. No one is drunk, no one is fighting. They talk in low voices about work, about family troubles, about the constant grinding struggle to stay one step ahead of disaster. "These are the invisible ones," Morrison says, his voice pitched just for your ears. "The ones who work 16-hour days at the factories or docks, the ones who send their children to work as soon as they can walk steadily, the ones who go hungry so their kids can eat something. Nobody writes about them because there's nothing sensational in quiet desperation." A middle-aged woman approaches your table. Despite her worn clothes, she carries herself with dignity. "Mr. Morrison," she greets your companion. "The usual?" "Thank you, Mrs. Callahan, and one for my friend here." She returns with 2 mugs of beer that's more foam than alcohol. But no one complains. This is a place where stretching resources is an art form. Mrs. Callahan was a nurse before her husband died, Morrison tells you after she moves away. Now she runs this place, provides basic medical care when she can, safer than the charity hospitals, people say. How do they afford medical care, you ask? Mostly they don't. They work until they drop, then hope someone takes care of their children when they're gone. You think of your comfortable life in England, your education, the safety nets of family and society that protected you from such desperate circumstances. The contrast makes you ashamed, though you know that shame without action is just another form of self-indulgence. "Tell me about the women," you say. "Not the ones in dance houses, but the regular women. How do they survive here?" Morrison takes a long sip of his beer, considering. "Hardest life of all, maybe. Working women here are either servants, factory girls, or they take in washing, sewing, anything they can do while minding children. Pay's always less than for men, hours just as long, and they're always one man away from ruin, a husband who drinks the wages or runs off or dies. And the children work as soon as they're able. Boys sell newspapers, shine shoes, run messages, girls help with washing or sewing, or mind younger ones while mother works. Childhood doesn't last long in Water Street. The tavern grows more crowded as evening deepens. Men coming off shifts, women finishing domestic work. You notice they cluster in small groups, often by nationality. Irish here, Germans there, Italians in the corner, Chinese by the door. Another truth about Water Street, Morrison comments, following your gaze. Everyone needs someone to look down on. The Irish despise the Italians, who look down on the Chinese. The Germans think they're better than all of them. Misery loves company, but it loves feeling superior even more. A sudden silence falls as the door opens, admitting a well-dressed man whose clothes and bearing immediately mark him as an outsider. He carries a small black book and wears the earnest expression of a missionary entering heathen territory. "Right on schedule," Morrison mutters. "Sunday evening sermon and soup. The Reverend Mr. Phillips come to save our souls." The newcomer looks around the room, visibly gathering his courage. "Friends," he begins in a voice clearly trained for pulpits, "I bring good news and an invitation. The mission on Pearl Street offers warm soup and the word of God this evening to all who wish to attend." The response is tepid at best. A few nods, mostly blank stares. The Reverend soldiers on, undeterred by the lack of enthusiasm. "The Lord loves you all," he continues, "even in your circumstances. Salvation is available to everyone who seeks it." "Is the soup available to everyone too?" calls a voice from the back, prompting scattered laughter. The Reverend flushes slightly, but maintains his composure. "Yes, brother. food for body and soul. "I'll take mine without the sermon," the heckler replies, generating more laughter. Morrison leans closer. Most folks here have had their fill of being talked down to by well-meaning Christians who've never missed a meal in their lives. The soup's welcome, the sermons not so much. The Reverend distributes some pamphlets and retreats, likely to make the same announcement at other establishments throughout the neighborhood. Are the missions completely ineffective, you ask once he's gone? Not completely, Morrison concedes. They provide food, sometimes clothing or basic medical care, but they're trying to treat gangrene with bandages. The problems here go much deeper than lack of religion. As darkness falls outside, the tavern's atmosphere shifts subtly. People speak more openly, share more freely. You listen to stories of impossible choices, medicine or rent, food or fuel, which child gets new shoes and which goes without. You hear about jobs lost to illness, opportunities denied due to accent or appearance, the constant grinding fear of ending up in the poorhouse or on the street. "That's the real story of Water Street," Morrison says, as you finally prepare to leave. "Not the spectacular violence or the brothels or the corrupt cops. It's this. People living on the knife's edge every single day, one misfortune away from complete ruin." Outside, the rain has stopped, but the streets are slick with mud and refuse. The gas lamps cast just enough light to navigate by, creating pockets of illumination in the overwhelming darkness. The sounds of Water Street at night, music from dance halls, shouts from saloons, occasional screams or breaking glass form a background cacophony that the residents have learned to ignore. You walk Morrison to his lodgings, a room not unlike yours, in a slightly better building. Before parting, he hands you several pages of notes he's been jotting throughout the day. Names, places, facts you might find useful, he explains, including some people worth talking to if you're continuing your research. "I am," you confirm. "What time tomorrow?" 9 at Dutch Mary's. "I'll introduce you to some of the women, the real backbone of Water Street. They see everything, know everything." As you make your way back to your own boarding house, you reflect on how differently you're seeing Water Street now. The sensational elements that first caught your attention, the violence, the vice, the corruption, are still present, but they're now part of a larger, more complex picture. Behind every brothel are women with stories. Behind every saloon are men trying to numb the pain of impossible lives. Behind every street fight is the desperate logic of people with nothing left to lose. You reach your boarding house just as the church bells strike 10. Climbing the narrow stairs to your room, you listen to the sounds of the building settling for the night. Murmured conversations, a child's muffled crying, the creaking of old wood adjusting to the night's dampness. This is the real pulse of Water Street, not the dramatic flourishes of daylight crime or nighttime debauchery, but the quiet persistence of people enduring what must be endured. In your small room, by the light of a single candle, you begin writing, not just recording facts and observations, but trying to capture the humanity behind the statistics, the dignity amid degradation, the complex economics of survival in America's most notorious slum. All right, that's a good chunk. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. Morning arrives in your boarding house room with the sounds of life stirring, a baby crying somewhere below, floorboards creaking as early risers begin their day, muffled coughing that echoes through the thin walls. Sleep clings to you like a needy lover, reluctant to let go after a night of fitful rest on the lumpy mattress. Your back protests as you sit up, muscles still sore from dock work 2 days ago. Hunger gnaws at your stomach, a constant companion in Water Street, even for those like you who have the means to quiet it. The day promises rain again, grey clouds hanging low over the tenements. You dress quickly in your workman's clothes, now properly rumpled from sleeping in them, adding to your disguise of respectable poverty. When you arrive at Dutch Mary's, Caleb Morrison is already there, nursing a cup of coffee and making notes in a small leather-bound book. He nods a greeting as you slide into the seat across from him. "Sleep well?" he asks, though his tone suggests he knows the answer. "Like a baby," you lie. "If the baby had fleas and slept on a sack of walnuts," he chuckles. "You get used to it, or you don't sleep. Those are the options." Dutch Mary herself brings you coffee without being asked, her massive presence somehow comforting in its solidity. "Eggs today," she announces, "and actual bacon. Got lucky at the market. The breakfast is indeed better than yesterday's. The bacon only slightly rancid, the eggs fresh enough." You eat quickly, knowing the day ahead will require energy. "So," you say between bites, "you mentioned meeting some of the women of Water Street." Morrison nods. "The real power behind this place, though you'd never know it from looking. Men run the saloons and brothels, handle the politics and violence, but women, they're the ones who keep people alive." "How so?" "You'll see. Better than me telling you." Your first stop is a basement laundry on Cherry Street. The air hits you like a wet fist as Morrison leads you down the steps, hot, damp, heavy with soap and sweat. Through the steam, you make out a dozen women working at large tubs, their faces flushed from the heat, arms red to the elbows from harsh lye soap and constant immersion in water. "Most of these women have husbands who work the docks," Morrison explains quietly. "But dock work is irregular. You might get hired 3 days one week, none the next. The washing is steady, hard but steady. A woman in her 40s, thin but wiry, approaches, wiping her hands on a stained apron. Her face bears the weathered look of someone who has spent too many years in hot, humid rooms. "Mr. Morrison," she greets him with a nod. "These girls are almost finished with the hotel linens, still need to start on the restaurant tablecloths. Mrs. Donovan, this is Arthur," Morrison introduces you. "He's researching how people live in Water Street." "Thought you might have some insights." Mrs. Donovan eyes you with wary assessment. "What kind of research?" "I'm a journalist," you admit. "I want to write about the real conditions here, not just the sensational stories, but how people actually survive." She considers this, then gestures toward a small office area sectioned off from the main laundry room. 10 minutes. That's all I can spare." In the relative quiet of the office, which is little more than a desk and 2 chairs separated by a curtain, Mrs. Donovan gets straight to the point. "What do you want to know that you can't see with your own eyes? We work. We get paid barely enough to keep breathing. We go home to rooms not fit for animals. We do it all again the next day. How do you manage it, you ask? Not just surviving day to day, but planning for the future? Dealing with emergencies?" A bitter smile crosses her face. "Future? In Water Street? That's a luxury, like silk dresses and hot baths. Yet you're still here, still fighting." Something in your tone must convince her of your sincerity. She sighs, the sound carrying years of exhaustion. "We have systems, nothing fancy. Women here, we look out for each other because nobody else will. Got a sick child? Neighbours take turns watching your other kids, so you can work. Husband drinks the rent money. Women's loan circle might cover you until next payday." "Loan circle?" 10 or 15 women each put in a few pennies every week. When someone needs it, really needs it, not for drink or foolishness, they can borrow from the pot, pay it back when they can. It's a simple banking system created by those excluded from official financial institutions. Necessity breeding innovation. What about the women in other professions? You ask carefully. Mrs. Donovan's expression hardens. The girls in the dance houses? Some were my neighbour's daughters once, some were mine. You don't judge them here. When it's choose between selling yourself or watching your children starve, you'd be surprised what becomes acceptable. Her candour strikes you silent for a moment. This is a perspective you haven't heard, not condemnation of vice, but understanding of impossible choices. The work breaks them down, she continues. Laundry ruins your hands, factory work ruins your lungs, sewing ruins your eyes, scrubbing ruins your knees, dance houses ruin everything else, but a ruined woman still needs to eat. Morrison appears at the curtain. Mrs. Donovan, Jenny's having trouble with the mangle again. She rises with a sigh. Duty calls. If you want to know more, talk to Widow Malone on James Street. She's been here longer than anyone. Back on the street, Morrison leads you through a maze of alleys to a small grocery store barely larger than a closet. Inside, shelves hold meagre supplies, dried beans, flour of questionable quality, root vegetables, and a few luxury items like sugar and coffee in tiny, carefully measured portions. The proprietor, a hawk-faced woman with iron-grey hair pulled into a severe bun, watches you enter with suspicious eyes. Mrs. Malone, Morrison greets her. This is the journalist I mentioned. Humph, is her only response as she continues weighing out dried peas into small paper packages. Mrs. Malone has run this shop for 30 years, Morrison tells you. Knows more about Water Street economics than anyone. 32 years, she corrects without looking up. Since my Patrick died in the dock collapse of 35. You approach the counter, noting the precise organisation of her small stock. Mrs. Donovan mentioned you might tell me about how women survive here long term. The widow finishes her measuring before answering. Survival's a relative term in Water Street. Nobody lives long. Just some manage to die of old age instead of violence, drink or disease. Yet you've managed 32 years on your own. This earns you a sharp glance. Not on my own. That's the first thing you need to understand. Nobody survives Water Street alone. She comes around the counter, flipping the sign on her door to closed, a significant sacrifice of business for someone in her position. I'll give you 20 minutes, she says, for Morrison's sake, as she makes tea on a small stove in the back of the shop. Real tea, you note, not the chicory substitute most can afford. Widow Malone begins her education on the women's economy of Water Street. Men think they run things with their fists and their politics, she says, echoing Morrison's earlier comment, but women are the ones who make life possible. We're the ones who stretch $1 until it screams, who know which landlords might wait an extra day for rent, which pawnbrokers give fair value, which doctors will treat a sick child without demanding cash up front. She pours the tea into chipped cups. This shop started with money from my dead husband's dock mates. They passed the hat, gave me enough to buy initial stock. I've helped 20 other widows start businesses since then. That's how it works. A community bank, you observe. Call it what you want. We call it survival. You ask about the dance houses, the brothels, the women you saw working in those establishments. The widow's face doesn't change, but her eyes grow harder. Some of those girls used to come in here with their mothers, buy penny candy with bright eyes. Now they come in wearing rouge, eyes dead as stones. She shakes her head. Don't think they chose that life. Water Street doesn't offer many choices. Do you help them too, you ask? When they let me. Some are too far gone. The gin or the opium has them, but the newer ones, sometimes I can steer them to a factory job or connect them with a family needing a maid uptown. If they're young enough, pretty enough, not too damaged, they might get out. And the others? She just looks at you, and the answer is clear. Some ships, once wrecked on Water Street's shores, can never be salvaged. What about children, you ask? How do mothers protect them from all this? The widow's laugh is sharp, without humour. They can't. Best they can do is keep them alive until they're old enough to work. A 10-year-old boy can sell newspapers or shine shoes. A 12-year-old girl can help with sewing or laundry. By 15, they're either working full-time or... She doesn't finish the thought. No school, no childhood. Childhood? She looks genuinely puzzled by the concept. Maybe for rich folks' children. Here, you're born owing the world for the space you take up. You start paying that debt as soon as you can stand. The conversation is interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Widow Malone opens it to admit a girl of perhaps 16, thin to the point of gauntness but clean and neatly dressed despite her obvious poverty. Mrs. Malone, mother sent me for... She stops, noticing you and Morrison. It's all right, Lizzie, the widow says. Your mother's medicine is ready. Tell her the same as usual. The girl nods, accepting a small paper packet. No money changes hands, you notice. My sister's girl, Widow Malone explains after Lizzie leaves. Sister's consumptive, tuberculosis. Medicine costs more than they can afford, but family's family. You support them? Not just me. Network of widows, we all chip in. 1 month I cover Sarah's medicine. Next month maybe I need help with coal for the stove. System works. Unless everyone's in trouble at once, you observe. That happens, she acknowledges. Bad winters, cholera summers, then we just do what we can and pray for those we can't help. Morrison, who has been quietly observing, checks his watch. We should move on if you want to meet the others. Widow Malone nods. Go see Agnes at the Sewing Circle and stop by the settlement house if you want to see the only real help these people get. Throughout the afternoon, Morrison guides you through Water Street's female spaces, places largely invisible to casual observers. A sewing circle in a tenement's common room where women gather to share work, childcare and information. A small herbalist shop run by an elderly Chinese woman who provides remedies when regular medicine is unaffordable. A soup kitchen operated by women who themselves have barely enough to eat. At each stop you hear variations on the same theme, women creating systems to compensate for society's failures, building safety nets from scraps of resources, forming alliances that make survival possible, if not comfortable. Agnes, the seamstress Widow Malone recommended, explains it best. Men make the problems, women solve them, she says, as her needle flashes through fabric. Man drinks the rent money, women figure out how to avoid eviction. Man beats his wife, women hide her until he cools off or drinks himself to death. Man abandons his family, women make sure those children eat. Doesn't seem fair, you comment. Fair? She looks up, genuinely startled by the concept. Water Street isn't about fair, it's about getting through today so you can face tomorrow. Late afternoon finds you at the settlement house, a relatively new concept in American cities where educated reformers live among the poor they hope to help, offering practical assistance rather than just religious guidance. The settlement house is clean and orderly compared to the chaos outside. Young women from good families, the kind who could easily be living comfortable lives uptown, move purposefully through rooms designated for specific services. A small classroom where children receive basic education, a medical station where minor ailments are treated, a kitchen serving nutritious if plain meals. Morrison introduces you to Miss Bradford, a serious-looking woman in her 30s who runs the operation. Unlike the missionaries you've encountered, she has no religious pamphlets, makes no mention of salvation. Instead, she speaks of practical matters, vaccination programs, cooking classes, employment registries. We can't solve poverty, she tells you in her direct way, but we can teach a mother how to keep her baby alive despite it. We can give a girl enough education that she might find work as a shop clerk instead of a prostitute. Small victories. Does it make a difference, you ask, in the larger scheme? For the individual, yes. For Water Street as a whole? She shrugs slightly. The problems are systemic. We're putting bandages on bullet wounds. It's nearly the same metaphor Morrison used about the missions, but coming from Miss Bradford, it carries the weight of someone who recognises the limitations of her work, yet continues regardless. The city could clean this up if they wanted to, she adds, a rare flash of anger breaking through her practical demeanour. Proper sanitation, housing regulations, fair wages, these aren't mysteries, they're political choices. Then why aren't those choices made? Because Water Street serves a purpose, she says simply. It provides cheap labour, cheap vice, cheap lives. The same businessmen who donate to charities with one hand are profiting from tenement ownership with the other. As evening approaches, you find yourself back at Dutch Mary's with Morrison, both of you nursing beers that are more water than alcohol. The day has left you mentally exhausted, the weight of so many desperate stories pressing down like a physical burden. How do you bear it, you ask Morrison. Knowing all this, seeing it every day, he considers the question seriously. You focus on the small things, Mrs. Donovan's daughter getting apprenticed to a dressmaker uptown, Widow Malone helping a girl escape the dance houses, Miss Bradford teaching a child to read. You can't fix Water Street, but maybe you can help one person climb out of it. And the rest? The rest endure. That's what humans do. We're remarkably good at it. The door opens, admitting a gust of cold air and a woman you recognize, the same one you saw days ago, drunk and singing to a lamppost. Tonight she's sober, or at least less intoxicated, her movements more controlled, though still bearing the slight hesitation of someone intimately familiar with gin. Margaret, Morrison greets her with surprising warmth. Join us? She approaches your table, studying you with shrewd eyes that miss nothing despite her reputation as the neighbourhood drunk. This your journalist? Word travels fast, you observe. Margaret laughs, a surprisingly melodic sound from a ravaged throat. Fastest thing in Water Street is gossip, moves quicker than cholera. She sits without waiting for an invitation, and Dutch Mary brings her a cup of coffee without being asked. There's an odd respect in Mary's manner, suggesting Margaret holds some standing, despite her apparent position at the bottom of Water Street's social hierarchy. Morrison says you want the real story, Margaret says, fixing you with a direct gaze. Not just the blood and sin that sells papers. I do. Then ask me anything. 30 years in Water Street, I've done it all. Worked the factories till my lungs gave out, cleaned houses till my hands bled, sold myself till no one was buying. Now I just observe and occasionally talk to lampposts. She grins, showing surprising flashes of white teeth in her weathered face. Why do you stay? You ask, if it's so terrible. Where would I go? Water Street's home. I know every brick, every shadow. Out there, she gestures vaguely toward the unseen uptown. I'm just another dirty old woman. Here, I'm Margaret. Everyone knows me. Some even listen to me. She's being modest, Morrison interjects. Margaret used to be a teacher before life intervened. She still teaches anyone willing to learn. Reading, writing, and how to avoid the worst of Water Street's traps, Margaret confirms. Can't save them all, but some listen. There's something compelling about Margaret, a dignity that transcends her ragged clothes and alcohol-roughened voice. She's a survivor in the truest sense, someone who has seen the worst of Water Street and somehow retained her humanity. What should people know about this place, you ask her, if you could tell them one thing? She doesn't answer immediately, sipping her coffee with the air of someone savouring a rare luxury. Finally, she says that we're people, not exhibits, not statistics, not moral lessons, just people trying to get through each day with whatever tools we have. It's perhaps the simplest yet most profound insight you've gathered in your time here, not the corrupt police or the violent criminals or the elaborate network of vice, just people trapped in circumstances largely beyond their control, using whatever means available to survive. As darkness falls, Margaret takes her leave, declining Morrison's offer to walk her home. "Night's my time," she says cryptically. "Got rounds to make." "Rounds?" you ask Morrison after she's gone. She checks on people, the most vulnerable ones, old folks alone, sick children, new girls at the dance houses, brings soup sometimes or just company, does it every night, drunk or sober. Another piece of Water Street's complex social ecosystem falls into place. Even those who seem most defeated may serve functions invisible to outsiders. "I should head back," you tell Morrison. "Need to organize my notes, start drafting some of this." He nods. "Tomorrow?" "One more day, I think. I'd like to understand the politics better, how the system perpetuates itself, who benefits. Then I can start writing the full series." 9 o'clock here, Morrison agrees. "I'll introduce you to some people who understand the power structure. Not the obvious criminals, but the ones who really control Water Street." As you walk back to your boarding house through streets now fully dark, you reflect on how much your understanding has evolved in just a few days. The sensational elements that initially caught your attention now seem almost superficial compared to the complex social structures you've discovered. The women of Water Street, with their improvised financial systems and mutual aid networks, have created a parallel society within the official one that has failed them. Their resilience in the face of systematic oppression is both inspiring and heartbreaking, a testament to human adaptability and a damning indictment of a society that makes such adaptation necessary. In your small room, by candlelight, you review your notes from the day. The faces and voices of Water Street's women float through your mind. Mrs. Donovan with her lye-reddened hands, Widow Malone with her carefully measured portions, Miss Bradford with her practical idealism, Margaret with her lamppost soliloquies and midnight rounds. Each has found a way to create meaning in a place designed to strip humanity bare. Each has built a life from materials most would consider insufficient. Each offers a different kind of survival strategy, not just for the body, but for the soul. Tomorrow you'll learn about the politics, the power, the systemic forces that create and maintain places like Water Street. But tonight you write about the women, their strength, their networks, their quiet defiance of a world determined to break them. All right, that's a good chunk. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. The next morning dawns grey and cold, with a persistent drizzle that somehow feels appropriate for your final day of investigation. Your small room in the boarding house has begun to feel familiar, not comfortable exactly, but known. The creaking floorboard by the door, the water stain on the ceiling shaped vaguely like a ship, the thin mattress with its particular arrangement of lumps, all have become part of your temporary existence. You dress slowly, your body now accustomed to the chill of unheated rooms, the damp that seeps through walls and into bones. Outside your window, Water Street is already awake. It never truly sleeps. People move with purpose despite the rain, heading to whatever work or schemes or desperate measures will get them through another day. Dutch Mary's is busier than usual when you arrive, the bad weather driving people to seek warmth and hot coffee. Morrison sits at what has become your table, deep in conversation with a well-dressed man who looks distinctly out of place among the workmen and dock labourers. "Arthur!" Morrison greets you, using your real first name. "Meet Patrick Sullivan. Patrick runs the Fourth Ward Democratic Club." Sullivan stands to shake your hand. His grip is firm, his smile practiced, his eyes calculating. He's a compact man in his 40s, neither handsome nor ugly, the kind of forgettable face that serves a politician well. His suit is good quality, but not ostentatious, expensive enough to signal success, modest enough to avoid resentment. "Mr. Pember," he says, pronouncing your name with the confidence of someone who makes it his business to know things. "Caleb tells me you're writing about our little corner of paradise." You glance at Morrison, who shrugs slightly. Word gets around. "Please join us," Sullivan gestures to the empty chair. "Dutch Mary's coffee isn't Delmonico's, but it'll wake the dead." As if summoned, Mary appears with coffee for you and fresh cups for the men. Sullivan slips her a coin that makes her eyebrows rise slightly before she pockets it without comment. "So," Sullivan continues once Mary has gone, "you want to understand how Water Street really works. Not just the surface mess that fills newspaper columns, but the machinery underneath." "Something like that," you agree cautiously. Sullivan leans back, studying you. "Why? Most journalists are happy with the blood and sin, sells papers. I want the truth, the whole picture." A smile flickers across his face. "Truth's a slippery thing in Water Street. Depends who's telling it, who's buying it, who's enforcing it." "Then tell me your version." He considers this, then nods slightly, coming to some internal decision. "Walk with me. Conversations like this go better in motion." Outside, the rain has eased to a fine mist. Sullivan produces an umbrella large enough to shelter both of you, leaving Morrison to follow a step behind, getting progressively damper. "First thing to understand," Sullivan begins as you walk, "is that nothing in Water Street happens by accident. Not the poverty, not the vice, not the occasional reforms that make headlines then disappear. It's all part of a system. A corrupt system, you suggest?" He laughs. "Corrupt implies there was something pure that became tainted. This system was designed exactly as it functions." You pass a policeman who nods respectfully to Sullivan. The same officer would likely have hassled or arrested you in your beggar disguise. But with Sullivan, his manner is almost deferential. "The police?" you ask, noting the interaction. "Part of it. They enforce when necessary, look away when profitable, but they're just employees, not architects." "Oh, who are the architects?" Sullivan gestures broadly, encompassing not just Water Street but the city beyond. Men who never set foot here, bankers, industrialists, politicians at levels far above my humble station. Men who need cheap labour, reliable votes, profitable vice, convenient scapegoats. And where do you fit in this system? Another laugh, this one with genuine amusement. I'm middle management. I make sure the Fourth Ward delivers its votes to the right candidates. I direct certain funds to certain projects. I maintain the balance between tolerable and intolerable misery. For profit? Of course, for profit. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon, Mr. Pember. I was born 3 blocks from here, fought my way out of the gutter penny by bloody penny. Now I make sure the wheels turn and take my percentage for the service. Sullivan leads you down a side street to a nondescript building with a small sign identifying it as the Fourth Ward Democratic Association. Inside, it looks more like a social club than a political office. Men playing cards, reading newspapers, talking in small groups. They fall silent as Sullivan enters, offering nods of respect. This is where the real business of Water Street happens, Sullivan tells you, guiding you through to a back room furnished with a large table and comfortable chairs. Not in the dance halls or the saloons or even the police station. Here, where decisions are made about who thrives, who survives, and who doesn't. Morrison takes up position by the door, seemingly comfortable with his role as observer rather than participant. Sullivan gestures for you to sit at the table. Let me give you an example, he says, pouring amber liquid from a decanter into 2 glasses. Last year, a real estate consortium wanted to build warehouses where the tenements on Dover Street stand. Good business move. Locations perfect for the East River shipping. Problem is, 200 families live in those tenements. What happened? I negotiated. Consortium agreed to build new tenements 2 blocks over before demolishing the old ones. Not good tenements, mind you, just the bare minimum. But people got relocated instead of evicted. Consortium got their warehouses. I got a generous donation to the Democratic Association. Everyone won. He pauses. Well, the families still live in squalor, but a different squalor with a roof. You call that winning? Sullivan studies you over his glass. In Water Street, absolutely. They could have been on the street. Many have been for less. The ease with which he discusses human suffering as a negotiating point makes your stomach turn, but you keep your expression neutral. And the police, where do they fit? They maintain order on terms beneficial to those who matter, break up labour disputes that threaten business, ignore vices that generate profit, protect certain enterprises while shutting down competitors, like Tommy Haddon's Shanghai operation, you suggest. Sullivan's eyebrows rise slightly. You've been thorough. Yes, Haddon pays well for protection. Ships need crews. Captains don't ask questions about where the men come from. The police ensure Haddon's operation continues smoothly. And Kit Burns' rat pits? A more complicated case. Burns is protected for now, but that may change. The winds are shifting on blood sports, too many reformers making noise, too much negative attention. Burns doesn't understand that his business model has an expiration date. You think of Burns's defiant defense of rat baiting. He truly doesn't see what Sullivan sees. That public tolerance for certain vices ebbs and flows, and successful criminals adapt accordingly. What about the missions, the reformers, the settlement houses? Sullivan smiles thinly. Necessary parts of the ecosystem. They handle problems that would otherwise become costly, provide minimal care for those who might otherwise die in the streets and create public health issues. Occasionally satisfy the conscience of uptown donors. And most importantly, they create the illusion that something is being done. You sound cynical, you observe. Realistic, he corrects. I've watched a dozen reform movements come and go. Newspaper exposés, charity campaigns, political promises. Water Street remains essentially unchanged. What would create real change? Sullivan considers this seriously. Higher wages, housing regulations, public sanitation infrastructure, consistent law enforcement rather than selective targeting. But those things cost money and reduce profits for the men who matter. So instead, we get missions and moral crusades against specific vices. A knock at the door interrupts your conversation. A young man enters, whispers something to Sullivan, then leaves. Duty calls, Sullivan sighs. The boring machinery of ward politics requires my attention. But before I go, what exactly do you plan to write about Water Street, Mr. Pember? The truth, you say simply, as best I can understand it. A noble goal. His tone suggests he finds it naive. Just remember that your truth will be read primarily by people who benefit from Water Street remaining exactly as it is. They'll cluck their tongues, donate $1 to a mission, and sleep soundly believing they've done their part. He stands, straightening his cuffs. Morrison will introduce you to Eddie Flanagan next. Eddie sees a different side of Water Street politics, the ground level. Between us, you might get close to something resembling truth. With that, Sullivan is gone, leaving a vacuum of energy in the room. You realize he's one of those men whose presence fills a space completely, making it seem emptier than before once they depart. Impressed? Morrison asks, taking Sullivan's vacated seat. He's candid. Sullivan sees Water Street as a business operation, unpleasant but necessary. He's not wrong, just incomplete. And this Eddie Flanagan will provide the missing pieces? Morrison smiles. Different perspective, at least. Sullivan manages Water Street from above. Eddie survives it from within. Eddie Flanagan turns out to be a broad-shouldered man in his 30s, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow and hands that speak of hard labour. You meet him at a small coffee shop near the docks, not Dutch Mary's, but a similar establishment catering to working men rather than criminals or sailors. Eddie's what you might call a community organiser, Morrison explains after introductions, though he'd never use such a fancy term. I handle problems, Eddie says simply. His voice is quiet but carries a weight that suggests he rarely needs to raise it to be heard. When official channels aren't available or reliable, what kind of problems? Landlord refuses to fix a collapsed ceiling. Employer withholds wages. Loan shark gets too aggressive with collections. Gang of kids targeting old folks for robbery. He shrugs. Water Street has plenty of problems. And you solve them? How? Eddie's smile doesn't reach his eyes. Persuasively. You can easily imagine this solid man being very persuasive indeed, particularly with those who prey on the vulnerable, but there seems to be more to him than simple muscle. Eddie organizes mutual protection networks, Morrison explains. People in a building or on a block looking out for each other, taking turns watching children, guarding against thieves, sharing resources in emergencies. The police don't do those things, you ask, though you already know the answer. Eddie snorts. Police come when a rich man calls or when they want something. Rest of the time, we're on our own. Tell him about the fire on Pearl Street, Morrison suggests. Eddie nods, warming to his role as storyteller. 2 winters ago, tenement caught fire in the middle of the night. 6 families. Police showed up, but just kept people back. Didn't actually help. Fire brigade was slow. They always are in poor neighbourhoods. He takes a sip of coffee before continuing. So we formed a bucket line ourselves. Got everyone out. Saved most of the building. Then took in the families who lost their rooms, distributed them among neighbours until repairs were made. Without official assistance, Water Street takes care of its own, Eddie says simply. Has to. Nobody else will. Throughout the afternoon, Eddie shows you his Water Street, not the vice districts that draw thrill-seekers from uptown, not the political machinery that Sullivan manages, but the interconnected networks of ordinary people creating safety where none is provided. You meet Mrs. Chen, who came to America as a young bride and now organizes the Chinese laundry workers for mutual protection against harassment. You visit Mr. Abramowitz, whose tailor shop serves as an informal courthouse where neighborhood disputes are settled without involving police. You speak with Father Donnelly, whose church doubles as a shelter and soup kitchen without asking about religious affiliation. These are the invisible structures that make survival possible, community-created institutions that fill the gaps left by official neglect. None appear in newspaper accounts of Water Street, yet all are essential to its functioning. People see Water Street as just crime and misery, Eddie tells you as afternoon fades toward evening. They don't see the strength, the ways we've learned to survive despite everything stacked against us. The mutual aid networks, you observe, they're sophisticated, had to be. When the cholera came through in 49, we lost hundreds because we weren't organized. When it came back in 54, we were ready, had systems for isolating the sick, caring for children whose parents fell ill, distributing clean water, still lost people, but not nearly as many. Why doesn't the city provide these services, you ask, though again you suspect you know the answer. Eddie's expression darkens. Ask your friend Sullivan. City services go where money and votes dictate. Water Street has votes but uses them wrong, according to men like Sullivan. We're bargaining chips, not citizens. As you walk back toward your boarding house in the gathering dusk, Morrison is unusually quiet. Finally, he speaks. So now you've seen it all. The vice, the corruption, the poverty, the survival networks. What will you tell your readers? It's the question that's been growing in your mind throughout this final day. How to convey the complex reality of Water Street, not just its sensational horrors, but its surprising strengths, its invisible resilience, its human dignity amid degradation. The truth, you say, echoing your answer to Sullivan, that Water Street isn't just a collection of statistics or sensational anecdotes. It's people making impossible choices in an unjust system. Some become Tommy Haddon or Kit Burns, profiting from others' misery. Some become Margaret or Eddie, creating systems of mutual support. Most just endure day after day, because what choice do they have? Morrison nods, seemingly satisfied. The story doesn't usually get told that way. It should. At your boarding house, Morrison pauses. Last night in Water Street? Yes, I have what I need now. I'll start writing tomorrow, back at my hotel. Been interesting, he says simply, offering his hand. You saw more than most outsiders bother to. You shake his hand, suddenly aware of how much your perspective has changed in just a few days. You came seeking sensation, dramatic scenes of vice and crime for your newspaper series. You found those, certainly, but also something far more complex. A community with its own rules, hierarchies, systems of mutual support, all existing in the shadows of society's neglect. Thank you, you tell Morrison with genuine gratitude. I couldn't have understood any of this without your guidance. A rare smile crosses his usually stoic face. Write it true, Arthur. That's all I ask. Alone in your room, you organize your extensive notes, pages filled with observations, quotes, details that will form the foundation of your series. The faces of Water Street parade through your memory. Tommy Haddon calculating his profits from stolen lives, Kit Burns defending his bloody entertainment, the dance house women with their gaudy finery and dead eyes, Mrs. Donovan's lie-reddened hands, Widow Malone measuring dried peas with military precision, Margaret singing to her lamppost, Sullivan orchestrating the machinery of managed misery, Eddie building protection from the ground up. Water Street is all of them. Predators and prey, exploiters and exploited, those who profit from desperation and those who fight against it. No simple narrative can contain its contradictions. No single moral can encompass its complexities. As you fall asleep on your lumpy mattress for the last time, you're already composing the opening paragraphs of your series in your mind, not sensationalized accounts of vice and crime, though those elements will feature, not sentimental portraits of noble poverty, though you've seen true nobility amid the squalor, but something truer. A community of human beings making their way through an inhospitable world with whatever tools they possess, creating meaning and structure where society has provided none. In the morning, you'll shed your workman's disguise, reclaim your identity as Arthur Pember, barrister-turned-journalist, and return to the relative comfort of your hotel. You'll write the stories that will shock and move your readers, perhaps even inspire some to action beyond the temporary salve of charity. But tonight, you're still part of Water Street, just another soul in this patchwork community of the forgotten, listening to the sounds of life continuing around you, resilient and persistent despite everything. The rain has stopped. Through your small window you can see a patch of night sky where the clouds have briefly parted. A single star shines through the gap. Distant, cold, beautiful. In Water Street, even small moments of beauty feel like victories. You fall asleep to the lullaby of a city that never truly quiets. Muffled conversations, distant laughter, the occasional shout, the persistent creak of old buildings settling into their foundations. Tomorrow, you'll tell their story. All right, that's a good chunk. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. Morning arrives with surprising gentleness, a soft gold light filtering through your grimy window. For once, the perpetual clouds over Water Street have parted, allowing actual sunshine to touch the dilapidated buildings. It feels almost like a farewell gift. You pack your few belongings, notebook filled with observations, pencil worn to a nub, the workman's clothes that have been your disguise. Your real clothes, the ones you arrived in, are bundled in a paper package Morrison brought yesterday. The fine wool feels alien against your fingers after days of rough cotton. Your landlady is sweeping the narrow hallway when you descend the stairs, her movements as brisk and irritated as the first day you met her. "Leaving?" she asks, though it's clearly not a question. "Yes, thank you for the room." She snorts softly. It's a room, nothing to thank for. You pay her the daily rate plus a little extra. She counts it carefully, then looks at you with slightly more interest. "You're that newspaper man," she says suddenly. "The one asking questions all over." "Yes," you admit, seeing no point in denial. She studies you for a moment longer. "Tell it straight," she says finally. "Not just the blood and sin. That's not all we are." "I will," you promise, touched by her unexpected concern for Water Street's reputation. Outside, the neighborhood looks different in the morning sunlight. Still poor, still rough, but somehow less menacing. Children play in the street, women hang laundry from windows, men head to whatever work they've found for the day, regular life continuing despite the hardships. You make one last stop at Dutch Mary's for breakfast. The place is quieter than usual, the morning rush already gone. Mary herself brings you coffee without asking, her massive presence somehow comforting in its familiarity. "Last meal in paradise?" she asks, a rare smile cracking her stern face. "How does everyone know I'm leaving?" She shrugs. Water Street knows its own business. The eggs and bread taste better than usual, or perhaps you've simply grown accustomed to the peculiar flavors of Water Street cuisine. As you eat, you observe the other patrons, working men mostly, eating quickly before heading to their jobs, not the criminals or the desperately poor, but the backbone of Water Street, those who cling to respectability by their fingernails, one missed paycheck away from disaster. They talk in low voices about ordinary things, work troubles, family matters, small triumphs and disappointments. Their concerns would be recognizable to working people anywhere. It's a reminder that beneath the sensational elements that draw outside attention, Water Street is fundamentally a community of human beings trying to build lives with inadequate materials. When you finish eating, Mary refuses your payment. "On the house," she says gruffly, "write something true." It's the second time this morning someone has asked you for truth rather than sensation, an unexpected burden of responsibility. You thank her and step out into the sunshine, ready for the transition back to your regular life. The walk to your hotel takes you through progressively cleaner, safer, more prosperous streets. With each block, you feel Water Street receding behind you, not just physically, but psychologically, as if you're shedding a skin you temporarily inhabited. By the time you reach the hotel, you almost feel like Arthur Pember again, Oxford-educated journalist, rather than the nameless beggar or workman you've been pretending to be. The hotel doorman hesitates when you approach, clearly confused by your appearance, the fine clothes you've changed into not quite disguising the days of Water Street grime still embedded in your skin and hair. "Mr. Pember," you remind him, and his face clears. "Of course, sir. Welcome back." Your room, your real room, feels absurdly luxurious after your Water Street lodgings. The bed with its clean linens and actual mattress, the wash basin with hot running water, the silence, blessed silence without thin walls transmitting every cough and argument from adjacent rooms. You strip off your clothes and stand in the bath, watching the water turn grey, then black as days of Water Street grime sluice from your body. You scrub until your skin is pink and raw, as if you could wash away not just the dirt, but the memories, the smells, the sounds. But those remain, etched into your consciousness, demanding to be recorded. Clean, shaved, dressed in fresh clothes, you sit at the writing desk by the window. Outside, respectable New York goes about its business. Well-dressed pedestrians, elegant carriages, evidence of wealth and comfort. It's hard to believe Water Street exists in the same city, though it's only a mile or so away. You begin to write. When is a man not a man? When is a woman not a woman? When they dwell in Water Street, New York. The words from the transcript feel right as you're opening. This isn't just reporting, it's an indictment of a society that allows human beings to be reduced to something less than human through systematic neglect and exploitation. The pages fill quickly as you describe what you've seen, heard, experienced. The physical details come easily. The overcrowded tenements, the disease-breeding gutters, the dance houses with their barely clothed women, the saloons where men drink themselves into oblivion. But you take special care with the human elements that might otherwise be overlooked. The dignity amid degradation, the systems of mutual aid, the surprising resilience of those who have every reason to surrender to despair. You write about Tommy Haddon with his Shanghai operation, Kit Burns with his rat-baiting pits, the corrupt police who maintain the system rather than enforcing the law. But you also write about Margaret checking on the vulnerable despite her own alcoholism, Widow Malone stretching resources to help others, Eddie Flanagan organising protection networks where official protection fails. Afternoon stretches into evening as you write, pausing only to light lamps as darkness falls. The words pour out of you, demanding release. This isn't just another newspaper series. It feels like testimony, bearing witness to a reality most of your readers will never experience directly. When you finally stop, hand cramping from hours of continuous writing, you have the framework for your entire series. New York's underworld after dark, the mysteries of Water Street exposed. Your editor will be pleased. The sensational elements will sell papers, while the deeper social analysis might actually educate readers about the true conditions in their city. A knock at your door interrupts your thoughts. A bellboy delivers a note from your editor at the Tribune requesting a meeting tomorrow morning to discuss your findings. You dash off a quick reply confirming the appointment, then return to your desk reviewing what you've written. Will it make a difference? Will readers care about Water Street beyond the vicarious thrill of reading about vice and crime from the safety of their comfortable homes? Will politicians be moved to address the systemic issues that create and maintain such neighborhoods? You think of Sullivan with his cynical view of reform movements that come and go while leaving fundamental conditions unchanged. Perhaps he's right. Perhaps exposés like yours are just another part of the machinery, creating the illusion of concern without prompting real action. But then you remember Morrison's parting words. "Write it true, Arthur, that's all I ask," and the landlady's unexpected plea. "Tell it straight, not just the blood and sin, that's not all we are," and Dutch Mary's gruff command, "Write something true." Truth may not be sufficient to create change, but it's necessary. Without accurate accounts of Water Street's reality, there's no hope for meaningful reform. Your articles won't save Water Street, but they might be one small step toward awakening public conscience. As midnight approaches, you finally prepare for bed, a real bed with clean sheets and a soft pillow. Your body aches for rest after days of tension and discomfort, but as you lie in the darkness, sleep proves elusive. Your mind continues to race with images and voices from Water Street. Margaret singing to her lamppost, the dead-eyed dance-house girls, the children playing in gutters flowing with filth, the casual violence of everyday interactions. The contrast between your current comfort and the conditions you just left feels almost obscene. Here you lie in clean sheets while thousands suffer less than a mile away. You can leave Water Street behind, its residents cannot. I spoke with a historian who studied investigative journalism of this period. She told me Pember's articles caused quite a stir when published, with many readers expressing shock at conditions they hadn't known existed in their city. Some reform efforts followed, though as Sullivan predicted, most addressed specific symptoms rather than underlying causes. Still, Pember's work helped set a template for investigative journalism that exposed social ills. Sleep finally comes, but your dreams are filled with Water Street, not its horrors, but its people going about their business with the strange dignity you observed even in the worst circumstances. They don't need your pity, these dream figures seem to say. They need justice, opportunity, the same chance at decent lives that more fortunate citizens take for granted. You wake early, refreshed despite your troubled dreams. Today, you'll meet with your editor, begin the process of transforming raw observations into a polished series that will introduce Water Street to Tribune readers. The real work is just beginning. Over breakfast in the hotel dining room, fresh eggs, crisp bacon, coffee that actually tastes of coffee, you organize your thoughts. The series will need to balance sensational elements that attract readers with substantive analysis that educates them. It must shock without exploiting, expose without dehumanizing, critique without condescending. As you're finishing your meal, a newspaper boy enters the dining room, hawking the morning edition. Extra, extra raid on Water Street dance houses, police arrest dozens. You purchase a paper and scan the front page article. Last night, it seems, police conducted a massive raid on several Water Street establishments, including Tommy Haddon's place and 2 dance houses you visited. The article portrays this as a triumph of law enforcement against vice, with quotes from officials promising to clean up the Fourth Ward once and for all. You know better. This is just another performance in the ongoing theatre of Water Street governance, periodic shows of enforcement that change nothing fundamental, that likely were arranged in advance with bribes determining which establishments were targeted and which were warned. By next week, business will continue as usual, perhaps with slightly different players or in slightly different locations. At the Tribune offices, your editor greets you enthusiastically. George Sanders is a burly man in his 50s, a veteran newsman who recognizes a good story when he sees one. Pember, you look like you've been through the wars. He gestures to a chair across from his desk. Tell me you got something worth the risk. You outline what you've discovered, showing him your draft of the first article. As he reads, his eyebrows rise progressively higher. This is not what I expected, he says finally. I sent you for blood and thunder, dance houses, crimes, Shanghai operations, the stuff that sells papers. It's all there, you point out. But in context, he reads more, nodding slowly. The social analysis, the economic systems, the community structures, that's not typical crime reporting. Water Street isn't just a crime story. It's a human story, a political story. Sanders leans back in his chair, considering. It's good work, Pember. Different, but good. We'll run it as a 12-part series, starting Sunday. Lead with the most sensational elements to hook readers, then layer in the deeper analysis. By the time they realize they're reading sociology instead of crime reporting, they'll be too invested to stop. You leave the Tribune offices with a sense of accomplishment. The series is approved, the first installment will appear this weekend, and Sanders has granted you unusual freedom to tell the story your way. Walking back to your hotel, you pass a newsboy shouting about the Water Street raids. A well-dressed woman purchases a paper, scans the headline, and comments to her companion, "Something should be done about those dreadful places. Such sin and degradation." You're tempted to stop to tell her what you've learned, that Water Street isn't just sin and degradation, but a complex community of people struggling within an unjust system. But what would be the point? Your articles will make that argument more effectively than a strange man accosting her on the street. In the following weeks, as your series runs in the Tribune, you receive various responses, letters from outraged citizens demanding reform, invitations to address charitable organizations, angry denunciations from officials who claim you've exaggerated conditions. A terse note from Sullivan, accurate but naive, nothing will change. Yet small changes do occur. A committee is formed to investigate tenement conditions. A mission opens that focuses on practical aid rather than just religious conversion. A particularly corrupt police captain is transferred out of the Fourth Ward. Not revolution, not wholesale reform, but incremental improvements that might make life marginally better for some Water Street residents. It's less than they deserve, but more than they had before your articles appeared. One afternoon, about a month after your return from Water Street, you receive a visitor at the Tribune offices, Caleb Morrison, looking slightly uncomfortable in the respectable surroundings. "Read your articles," he says without preamble. "You kept your promise, told it straight. Has there been any real impact?" you ask. "Some," The worst dance houses got shut down, though the girls just moved to other establishments. Tommy Haddon's been more careful, working through more middlemen. Kit Burns is feeling the heat, might have to find a new line of work. And the people? The regular residents? Morrison's expression softens slightly. Margaret asked me to thank you, said you saw Water Street clearly, not just its sins, but its humanity. The widow, too, she's getting more customers from uptown, people who read your articles and want to see Water Street for themselves. Tourists, you say, slightly disgusted. Money's money, Morrison shrugs. She's using it to expand her loan circle. You talk a while longer about specific people you met. Eddie Flanagan organising tenants to demand repairs, Mrs. Donovan teaching her daughter to read between laundry shifts, the settlement house expanding its services, small victories amid continuing hardship. When Morrison leaves, you feel a complex mixture of emotions: satisfaction that your work has had some positive effect, frustration that the fundamental conditions remain largely unchanged, nostalgia for the strange intensity of your Water Street days. You were only there a week, yet the experience has altered something essential in your understanding of humanity, its capacity for both cruelty and kindness, exploitation and solidarity, despair and resilience. Water Street showed you both the worst and the best of what people can be when pushed to extremes. In the years that follow, you write many more articles, cover many more stories, but none affects you quite like Water Street. It becomes your touchstone, your reference point for evaluating other situations, other communities, other human struggles. When you eventually return to England, you carry Water Street with you, not just in your notebooks, but in your consciousness, a permanent alteration in how you see the world. Long after your series has been forgotten by most readers, long after Water Street itself has been transformed by development and demographic changes, something of its spirit lives on in you. The unexpected dignity you discovered there, the systems of mutual aid created by those with nothing to spare, the stubborn persistence of humanity in the most inhospitable conditions. And sometimes, in your dreams, you still walk those narrow streets, still hear Margaret's drunken singing, still feel the pulse of that complex, troubled, resilient community that existed in the shadow of America's prosperity. Water Street, a place where humans could become something less than human, or sometimes against all odds, something more. As you drift towards sleep in your comfortable bed, so different from the lumpy mattresses of Water Street, you might reflect on how fortunate you are. Clean sheets, soft pillows, the security of knowing tomorrow holds no immediate threats. These simple comforts were unimaginable luxuries to the people you met in those dangerous slums. Let your body sink deeper into your mattress as you appreciate its support. Allow your muscles to relax, releasing the tension of the day. Your eyelids grow heavy as you remember Arthur Pember's courage in exposing those harsh conditions, his determination to tell the truth about a world most people never saw. Perhaps, like Pember, you've faced challenges today that tested your strength. Now it's time to rest, to let go of the day's struggle